a gay tax or an Asian tax. The allegations also say that freshmen were told to complete a naked skate that left them with ice burns. According to the sports publication The Athletic, 30 former players and team associates were interviewed about the abuse. Sunny, near 60 degrees today. Sunny, mid-50s tomorrow, 51 in Boston right now.
Support for NPR comes from the Association of Plastic Recyclers, whose member companies recycle plastic packaging into new products, working towards a world where everyone uses less by recycling more. Learn more at plasticsrecycling.org. This is NPR.
I'm Henry Santoro, GBH News 89.7.
He's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yeagan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library. And we are streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Hello, Jim.
Hey there. How was Springsteen, Jim?
How was Springsteen, Jim?
Spectacular. Spectacular. Not only was he spectacular, plus any band whose average member is older than I am is my kind of band. Let me tell you, they were insane.
3.5 hour show?
3+.
And he was
brilliant.
Impressive.
The whole band was brilliant.
Yep.
It was incredible.
Hope you didn't go broke buying the tickets.
One other thing, by the way, I assume you know there's a chance today is the day the President of the United States, former President of the United States, becomes the first president ever to be indicted for a crime. Needless to say, we are monitoring that. Should it happen during the show, we will bring it to you live. But first, if you were still in the camp of people who think climate change is some future generation's problem, something far away, something to worry about tomorrow, well, the fact that we just suffered a tie for the warmest winter, I don't know if suffered's the right word, in Massachusetts, and the latest UN climate report out yesterday might set you straight. The planet is on the brink of catastrophe. In the coming years, according to this UN report, climate disasters will become so extreme people will not be able to adapt. Heat waves, famines, infectious diseases could all claim millions of additional lives, according to the Washington Post coverage. Basic components of life as we know it, how the Earth functions, will be irrevocably altered. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is demanding that developed countries like the U.S. eliminate carbon emissions by 2040, up an entire decade compared to the rest of the world. Few nations are on track to fulfill their climate commitments. The developing world is suffering. Rich countries have a responsibility to act. Guterres says, is ours doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? Or are these succession of reports just becoming background music to you? Our number is 877-301-8970. On Friday, we spoke to Bill McKibben.
Yes.
Today, as you know, is a National Day of Action, 32123. It's a national day of action across the country. People are protesting to demand the four biggest banks stop funding the fossil fuel industry. We're going to talk to one of the local leaders for a few minutes in about a half hour. Meanwhile, the bad news, as we discussed with Bill as well, Joe Biden has reneged on a campaign promise not to approve new drilling on federal lands, recently announcing that project in Alaska, the Willow Project. Essentially, the question is, are we cooked, literally and figuratively? The number is 877-301-8970. You know what was trouble? I read the Washington Post coverage of the UN climate report right after it came out yesterday, and I worry that we have become sort of hardened to this. I mean, as horrible as the news is in every one of them, it's sort of like we discussed about Trump. Oh, another day in the life of Trump, the first president indicted in the history of the country. Sort of this. Every day we get the same horrible news, all of which is legitimate and frightening. But don't you think it starts rolling off too many people's backs?
I think it's definitely not even rolled on half the country's back, because former President Trump is a climate change denier. A lot of Republicans are climate change deniers. Obviously, President Biden, who obviously is a Democrat, just did a horrible thing, in my estimation, when the people from the UN are saying we cannot have any more new drilling of oil and new oil, these big pipeline projects. Yeah. What has he just done? He's okayed this horrible ConocoPhillips project up in Alaska,
which for decades is going to be pumping out oil.
30 years.
Yeah.
So and supposedly he did that because he can't risk losing moderates. Well, what do moderates want for the future of themselves and their children. You know, you look at what's just happening around here. You know, we love to ski around here, or at least some people love to ski around here. Mad River Glen, you know, famous place up in Waitsfield, Vermont. I didn't know this, but it was forced to suspend operations for many, many weeks because they couldn't get snow. You make artificial snow in all parts of New England, but you can't make artificial snow if the temperatures are above 30 degrees. Three fishermen fell through the ice on Lake Champlain in Vermont. I used to live in Vermont, and there were whole periods where it didn't get up. I remember there was a 6-week period when I lived there. I was ready to shoot myself, where the temperature didn't get above 0 degrees, and you could see the wind coming off Lake Champlain, and people would be out there in their ice boats, everything else, and driving these big trucks across the ice on Lake Champlain. That's all over now too. So I'm hoping it's a political problem in the United States. You know, if more people who are in the GOP can get their representatives to act on this, it would be a great thing.
Yeah, but it's pretty. Yeah, I mean, we asked Bill McKibben the other day, how hard is the job of people like John Kerry, our international climate person, when the president of the most powerful country in the world is approving something like the Willow Project? And he said it's damn near impossible. How do you convince, we're not worried about the people who are firmly committed to this, either elected officials or individuals, real people. How do you convince somebody on the sitting on the fence, not a lunatic climate denier, but somebody sitting on the fence, when what they're going to hear from the other side is, well, the champion of addressing climate change, Joe Biden, just did this huge project in total. His line was no drilling on federal lands, period.
Period. That's right.
Is what he said.
Meanwhile, he's announcing now, after he's gone ahead and okayed this project, this is the president warning on Monday that a warming planet poses severe economic challenges for the United States. And you see we have all these disasters now which are costing billions of dollars. FEMA goes in, the federal government goes in and tries to rescue people. I mean, we've been really slow on the uptake about this, but I don't know how you convince people, because as we said a million times, there is a fake news bubble and there is a real news bubble, and I think half the country's in the fake news bubble and believing misinformation about all sorts of things. But I like to think that the people that are active about this, you can take your governments can take their pension funds, you know, teachers' retirement plans, police retirement plans out of fossil fuel. You can take your own 401k, if you have one, out of fossil fuel. You can put pressure.
You can cut up your credit card at noon today in downtown Crossing.
And not have your money in a bank, which is funding fossil fuel projects. I mean, money talks. I think money's going to have to talk a lot louder and really quickly, but it's tough. It's tough.
By the way, as Bill told us also the other day, the 4 largest banks will tell us we can tell you right now, it's Bank of America, Chase, Citibank, and Wells Fargo. Those are the 4 targets of today's 32123 demonstration. They combined have provided $10 billion in funding to ConocoPhillips for this Willow thing. So it's not only Joe Biden on one hand, but it's also these 4 fossil fuel investing banks on the other. 877-301-8970. You know, I sort of feel that we're a broken record. It's not just us.
We are a broken
people
record.
much more important than we will ever be. And there isn't that much new to say, except that we're not doing enough. I mean, again, the UN Climate Report, I'm in no way minimizing the impact of this thing, but you just get the sense that it is falling on too many deaf ears.
Massachusetts, we're not going to meet our climate goals either right here in Massachusetts, and we're a pretty liberal state. So things are, we got to change things. I think we have to change them rather quickly.
Well, by the way, the good things that are happening here
years.
is Mayor Wu is announcing almost every day.
She's great.
Investing in buildings. Well, also the climate chief that we discussed yesterday with our transportation people, the first climate sort of czar overseer of all departments, appointed by Maura Healey. It's a major step in the right direction. It'd be nice if it was emulated in every other jurisdiction.
877-301-8970 is the number to call us or text us at. If you have any ideas or any encouragement along these lines, maybe you're going to the protest today. Are you going to join the people that are down at, where are they
Downtown Crossing.
Downtown Crossing.
We'll find out the details in a few minutes.
We're going to have someone that's going to call us from there. By the way, our producer, Jamie Bologna, just was out at Lake in Nevada.
This is horrifying.
And he went to Lake Mead, and as Jamie said to me this morning, 100 years ago, Lake Mead was flooded.
I know, it's incredible.
And this community lost their homes, this little small St. Joseph's. It was a Mormon's village, and it was supposed to be under 70 feet of water. It had been under 70 feet of water, but now on Lake Mead, You can see the foundations of the
He
houses.
visited the town.
And you can. It's like a desert floor. So it's really.
By the way, when I said I was horrified, I didn't just mean I was horrified about Lake Mead. I was horrified that he went to Las Vegas. That's what I was horrified about. Maybe the worst place other than Disneyland World on planet Earth.
And we complain about immigration now. Can you imagine what it's going to be like when there are heat waves and famines and infectious diseases all over the place? People have had their allergies earlier this year. Have you noticed that?
I do.
Do you see the daffodils all over the place?
Do you remember Bernie Sanders' most recent presidential campaign when he was asked at some debate what he considered to be the greatest foreign policy concern? Remember what he said?
What did he say?
Climate change. Because he was talking about migration that was going to happen by the millions and hundreds of millions of people because of climate. 877-301-8097. Let's go to Linfield. Jane, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome.
Hi, I apologize. I was waiting to see if I was going to get on air, and I just took a bite of tortillas. So,
how is it? Is it good?
It's very good.
Excellent. Enjoy it. What else?
I have two questions.
Yeah.
One, I'd love to know what GBH is actually doing to limit its greenhouse gases.
Well, that's a good question.
I know they built a building, and I'm sure they're doing things, and I think that would be a great thing to vote. Just to educate even listeners. And
Jamie, wait a second. Can you find that out for the caller? What's GBH doing specifically around climate change kinds of issues?
Well, we do have a pretty good, new building I think is pretty good about that,
but let's get the details. Jane, what's your second thing?
My second thing is I really like listening to you guys, and I think you provide a lot of really good information.
However,
exactly. I feel like you fall flat on this issue, and maybe, I was thinking about it, maybe by even having this is what you're doing to try to help. But I think you undermine the message because every time, even when you speak to Bill McKibben, say, oh, but we're the biggest hypocrites, we don't do anything. And I just feel like, I think it's time for you guys to step up and do something.
Well, let me tell you something. Doing something, the only thing we really have the ability to do other than individuals at our homes is use our platform. And I would say having maybe the most important person or one of the 5 most important people on the planet, the guy who wrote End of Nature in 1989, every month on our show talking about these issues, I think actually is fairly significant. And the other thing, Jane, with all due respect, we have 2 choices: to talk about the hypocrisy or to ignore the fact that Joe Biden just approved this embarrassment of a key environmentalist and friend of Bill McKibben called it climate terrorism. And I think that's fair. If you want to sugarcoat it and ignore it, you're not going to hear that here. But Jane, thank you for the call. And we're going to, GBH is proud to be, as you pronounce that, LEED? Is that how you say the word? LEED certified with the U.S. Green Building Council's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design Program. We're pleased the American Institute of Architects, along with Ben Menino, singled us out as one of the Boston's greenest buildings. That was when this new building, you're right, was built. So Jane, that's your answer. Thanks for asking the question. 877-301-8970.
Here's a texter. We need new leadership. Sorry, we need to get the dinosaurs out of office and replaced with a younger generation, the likes of Pete Buttigieg. He is definitely...
What are Maura Healey and Mayor Wu? And by the way, speaking of climate, to Jane, what was Jim Aloisi and Stacey Thompson? What was the argument they're making about cycling and mass transit yesterday?
Well, all they're talking
hugely about climate.
Is how we need to fix the team. We need to fix the train system so more people can use mass transit. 877-301-8970. Listen to this. We have a texter who just said this. Climate change is a political and economic scam.
Wait, who said that?
A texter. It's crazy.
Do me a favor. Is that person signed or not?
No. But
do me a favor.
They could call up if they want.
If you call, right, 877-301-8097. If you say you were the person who said this is all a scam, we promise we will move you up to number 1 on the list, so you'll have a huge audience to spout your
But you see
philosophy.
it right now, the extremes of cold and heat. Extremes of cold and heat. We had huge cold in Mount Washington this year, all-time record low, 108 degrees below zero. And then we had right here on February 16th, 62 degrees in Boston on February 16th. And in Europe, they talk about local temperature records were smashed. France, Hungary, the Netherlands, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Latvia, Czech Republic, Poland, Denmark, Belarus broke national records for warm weather in the wintertime. Those little Swiss villages we used to see that people used to dream about taking trips to, those cute little houses and all those little nice little what do you call them? You can skate on in the middle. I guess little what do you call things
How
in
the
the
hell
middle?
do I know?
Anyway, canals. Couldn't think of the word.
Oh my God.
Canals. They're gone, right? They're gone.
Yeah.
What
are they called?
Canals.
Canals, thank you.
Hans Brinker, the silver skates. Remember, he was skating on
remember him.
canals.
Yeah, I do.
Well, Hans Brinker can't
I don't
skate
think he
there
was real, but I know
anymore
what you mean.
because there are no
He
more.
can't.
He can't skate
That's
there
horrible.
anymore because there's no more canals.
It's really bad.
Okay, what texter says, thanks for please reminding everyone about Bill McKibben's third act protest today against the 3 big banks
4 big banks.
funding fossil fuel. They're at downtown crossing from noon to 1:30.
Let's go to Bob in Truro, one of my favorite places on planet Earth. Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Actually, the beaches in Truro are receding too because of what we're talking about.
Tell me about it.
But go
Tell
ahead.
me about it.
What's up?
Well, if you're one of the 300 green communities out of 51 in Massachusetts, here's an action you can take this year. The state introduced the new building energy codes in January. There's a new, it's called this, it's a mouthful, municipal opt-in specialized energy code.
This is the thing that Mayor Wu opted into last week, by the way, Bob, I think.
Yeah, that's great. There's 5 Truro, Brookline, Newton, Watertown,
Good.
Boston, and someone else. Anyhow, it's going to be on the Truro town meeting ballot, but get your town, if you're one of the green communities, start an initiative to get this on your ballot.
Got it.
You probably missed this year's town meeting, but whatever. Thank
Bob,
you.
thank you for bringing that up. We appreciate it. Again,
they're
just read
all-
what Mayor Wu did last week. She adopted what Bob is urging every community to adopt here in Massachusetts.
Here's another one. The experts said there would be an ice age in the 70s. Climate change doesn't exist. It's called weather.
Shut up. Let me tell you, by the way, Jamie's making a very important point. We keep mentioning downtown crossing. If you go to Third Act, THIRD, not 3RD, act.org, and you click on National Day of Action there, or when I click on something, it'll tell you all the communities. For example, Newton, Lexington, Bedford, not just downtown crossing, but that's the one closest to us. 877-301-8970 is our phone number. We got to take a break.
Oh, we have to take a break.
We have to take a break.
Okay, we're
So I
talking
said
about
that.
climate change. We're sitting here waiting for the infectious diseases to arrive because we haven't really done enough. But maybe we're going to start doing more. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at facebook.com/GBH News.
On the campaign trail, Maura Healey promised to tackle issues like education, housing, and climate. Now that she's governor, we want to hear from you. How is she doing? How do her priorities align with yours?
We all have a voice, and we should all have our voices heard. Make sure that what our politicians are doing is reflective of what we want, what we voted them for.
Have your say on Healey's agenda. Visit gbhnews.org/yoursay.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and The Huntington, presenting Clyde's, nominated for 5 Tony Awards, including Best Play. The comedy comes to the beautifully restored Huntington Theater from March 24th through April 23rd. Tickets at huntingtontheater.org. And Sunbug Solar, a full-service local solar energy company helping to grow renewable energy in Massachusetts since 2009. To learn more about current solar energy employment opportunities, visit sunbugsolar.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're talking about the climate. The UN climate report came out yesterday, devastating as you might imagine. The good news is there's actually a National Day of Action happening a day later, including in Boston and surrounding communities. We're going to talk to one of the leaders of the local effort in a couple of minutes. I want to read one text here because a lot of people are being critical of us, being critical of Biden. This is Gabby from Arlington. The lease that Biden approved was actually negotiated over 20 years ago during the Clinton administration. This is for the Willow Project administration, and fighting it in court would apparently have cost the U.S. millions without much to win. the case, and then he blocked the remainder of the area. The fighting, when the federal government, as big as the oil companies are, decides to fight something like this, it can go on for years, and maybe can bring ConocoPhillips to your needs. The Biden administration, Gabby, already said they got ConocoPhillips to cut back on the areas where they were going to be drilling. So let them cut back farther and let us make it so expensive through the protracted litigation that they decide maybe they should go elsewhere. The worst that happens is after we spend millions defending our position, meaning what should be the government's position. The worst is we end up where we are now. You got to fight is the bottom line. Tracy, you are next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome, Tracy. Hi.
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 I'm in front of the Bank of America in Lexington.
Oh, great, great.
There are looks like about 20 of us here so far. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if you wanted to speak to the organizer who I'm standing next to.
Sure. What's her name or his name?
Yeah. I'm not even sure.
Well, good. That's a good start.
Like to speak to you, Jim Brown.
Whoever the hell they are.
Okay.
Oh. Hi.
Hello.
Who are you?
Hi there.
What?
So we're in Lexington, and we're gathering a group of old folks who are not happy with our Bank of America, what they're doing with their money. They're funding fossil fuels.
We know that.
And they're compromising the future of our grandchildren and really all the living systems that are going to keep all of us going.
And you're all going to cut up your credit cards at some point between noon and 1:30. Is that true? No.
Well, some of us are. Yeah, some of us are.
Good.
Yeah, and I personally am going to wait for a reply from the Bank of America administration to see how they're going to respond to our request.
Well, why don't you do the opposite? I mean, you're the organizer. Why don't you cut up your card, then write them a note and say you'll get a new card if they respond positively. Tracy, we wish you a lot of luck. Join Tracy and her colleagues out in Lexington in front of the Bank of America. You'll be there for the next couple hours, right, Tracy? I mean, whoever you are?
This is Fran.
Hi, Fran.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, we will be, and we're beginning to gather now.
Great.
We were told that we can't go into the bank to present our message, but I emailed it to them. So.
Excellent. I would go in anyway and just say hi and see what they think and let us know. Hey, Fran, thank you, and thanks to you and Tracy and all your colleagues for doing what you're doing.
Bill McKibben expects to be arrested. He's in his rocking chair because a lot of the protesters with him, I think they're in D.C., are going to be in their rocking chairs, correct?
You know, he's a fairly soft-spoken guy, so I think people don't appreciate the historical impact he has had and continues to have with his writing and his advocating and his organizing. It's sort of him at one end of the spectrum, Greta Thunberg at age 20.
We know it's really disgraceful,
incredible.
too. We talk a lot about the Catholic Church and disgraceful sex abuse thing.
Yeah.
Bill McKibben talked about the Pope is writing one of the most influential documents ever. You know, maybe Catholics should worry a little bit less about abortion, a little bit more about the climate.
Love that, Marjorie.
That would be a wonderful thing, too.
Beautiful.
And by the way, we're getting a lot of emails from people who think climate change is just the weather, or from people who say things like other countries are much worse than us. I think the only one worse than us is China, actually, in terms of the amount of pollution that they've emitted. But other countries are doing terrible things, so what's the point of our doing good things because we're going to be counteracted by the other countries? And then we have people like Mike and Sharon who say things like, so Biden approved a lease that was granted decades ago. If they don't drill there, they'll make it up somewhere else, may as well have domestic advantages. And I think Mike is referring to the gas price kind of thing. But again, you know, is that what we're going to do? Because we want to have cheaper gas?
Forever.
We're just gonna let
till we burn up.
The country burn up?
Let's go to Peter. You're on Route 95 somewhere. Thank you for joining. Hi.
Good morning, rather. Yeah.
Hi to you.
I'm going to be really doom and gloom here.
Good.
So, the ship has already sailed, and while all these things that we're doing to try to get off fossil fuels, this is all great. The far greater danger right now, here now, is like what is going to happen. You were talking about mass migration. When everybody from the Southwest has to move because Lake Powell, all the mud from Lake Powell jams up the Hoover Dam, and then there's no power to Los Angeles or any place down there, or all the cities on the East Coast like Miami and Richmond and New York and Boston, we all get flooded underwater. We need to be doing things to help mitigate the disasters that we know are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So while this is all kind of good to send a message about this, That's going to take years, but we have these imminent dangers that are about to happen now that really need to be addressed.
So Peter, why are so many of your American neighbors in such a state of denial about what you're talking about?
So there was a great piece in the New York Times podcast yesterday, and this is not the only one, but I'm going to single out TikTok, but we live in a Tower of Babel, and the amount of misinformation that is broadcast
It's Marjorie's theme.
to everybody with no filter whatsoever. Like you're saying, people believe what they want to believe, and there's no credibility with any one organization or news organizations that people think like, oh, I can go here to get the actual truth. People believe the truth they want to believe, sadly.
Peter, that was a great call, and you're singing Marjorie's tune, and keep talking and keep acting. Thank you.
We have a lot of texters that are, climate change is not real, it's just the weather. But then we have these good citizens like Karen Cape Cod, who's taking advantage of Mass Save's $10,000 rebate and zero interest loan programs to switch to air source heat pumps for her home. They are giving out good rebates for heat pumps now, if that's something people are interested in. 877-301-8970. Ben from Spencer, thank you for calling.
Hey, Ben.
Hi, thanks for the call. So I have something which is potentially part of the solution, which is I'm not a charismatic leader, but I've thought of this nonprofit organization which crowdsources documentation of every lawmaker from every country that's a significant polluter and creating a dossier on every lawmaker, the extent to which they contribute to or, to preventing the climate change or to enhancing it, denying
What's it called?
And climatecrimes.humanity.org.
Great.
And essentially putting them on notice because lawmakers are motivated by money or fear. And there's plenty of money in this, but there's not enough fear on their part. And to basically threaten, charging them criminally in some world court for crimes against climate, crimes against humanity, climate crimes against humanity, for when the people start dying by the tens and hundreds of thousands, which will be in my lifetime, I believe.
Well, at minimum, by the way, I think what they fear in a much more real way is losing their job. And maybe if people learn what you're suggesting at that website, Ben, maybe their jobs are more at risk. And my experience is politicians, elected leaders, or elected people, I guess is more appropriate, respond when they think that their gravy train is about to end. So maybe that's the route. Ben, thanks for the call. We just spoke to Fran out in Lexington, who is part of the 32123 protest that Bill McKibben told us about on Friday. Now joining us from, I think, yes, at Chase Bank in downtown Crossing. And Chase is one of the four banks, Bank of America, Chase, Citibank, and Wells Fargo, that are being targeted today. It's on the 32123 protests for their continued investment in fossil fuels, including $10 billion investment in the Willow Project with ConocoPhillips, is Christine Gelstrup. She's co-coordinator of the Cambridge branch of the fabulous Mothers Out Front. It's a volunteer-driven grassroots climate action group. Hey, Christine, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jim, thanks for having us on. This is an important event, and we appreciate you covering it.
It's our pleasure. Marjorie.
Oh, thank you very much for joining us.
Sorry to bother you there.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was reading our text messages there. I'm sorry. So what's happening? What's the deal?
Well, so we've got so far about 30 people, but we're half an hour early.
Yep.
But the big news is that burning of fossil fuel is the number one cause of climate change, no matter what anyone says. All the scientists agree on that. That's not arguable anymore. And the best way we can stop that is to defund fossil fuel infrastructure spending and actually invest in our future through clean renewable energy. And that last caller was worried about jobs. There are so many more jobs in the renewable energy field than there are in the fossil fuel industry. And fossil fuels are the infrastructure is supposed to last about 50 years. Those are going to be stranded, wasted assets that are going to just drag the economy down. We need to get out of fossil fuels now.
Christine, can you give us the logistics on today? I know you're in front of Chase Bank, and I know the formal action downtown Crossing doesn't start till noon today. Are you all going to be in front of Chase until 1:30? You're going to move around? How do people join you if they want to?
No, they should come down to Chase. We'll be here until 1:30, chanting and singing and tweeting and taking pictures. But you can also go to the Third Act website and see where there are events all over. I think we've got 10 or so in Massachusetts. Go Massachusetts.
Thirdact.org. Where our colleagues tell us you arrived at the protest via train and scooter. Is that correct?
Yes, I normally bike, but I took my 17-year-old scooter so that I would get here on time.
Fabulous. Hey,
Good for
Christine
you.
Gelstrup, thanks so much for your work, and congratulations to your fellow people taking action
Yeah,
today.
Christine,
Good luck.
thank you very
Thanks
much
for calling in.
calling
Appreciate
us.
it.
And
Evan, thank you. There's so much more news about this now, and I really appreciate you covering it.
We
I
appreciate you
appreciate
helping
you being
us.
down there, and especially taking the time to spend the whole hour and a half down there protesting. But you know what? Despite what Christine says, I just got a text that says toxic vaccine causes climate change.
There you go.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Coming
He's
up.
picketing outside Anthony Fauci's house today instead of Chase Bank.
Coming up, March Madness
My
Madness
God.
with Sports Authority. Trenny Casey, you're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
I'm Marco Werman. We're living through history, and the world's newsroom has the first draft.
If journalists leave a scene, it becomes a black hole. Then the world doesn't find out what's happening. And when the world doesn't know what's happening, human sympathy also evaporates.
Looking for answers and making sense of global events as they happen. Join us on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Boston Ballet, presenting Don Quixote, returning for the first time in more than 10 years. Featuring choreography by Rudolf Nureyev and a score by Ludwig Minkus, on stage until March 26th. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And South County, Rhode Island, featuring 100 miles of coastline and 20 public beaches. South County visitors can find many ways to enjoy the water in the Ocean State. Learn more at southcountyri.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now by Trenny Casey, anchor and reporter for NBC Sports Boston. And I believe the single youngest person other than my daughter at Springsteen last night. Nice to see you.
It was very exciting to be at a concert. And I'm going to go to Taylor Swift in May, where I will be the oldest person at the concert. And I got to go to Springsteen last night, where I was one of the youngest.
What'd you think?
He's amazing. So I saw him 20 years ago at PNC Park in 2003, and it was an awesome show then. I just can't believe, so with Tiffany Faison and a couple of her close peeps. And at one point I was like, how old is he now?
73.
He's 73.
Stevie Van Zandt, 72. Niels Lofgren, 71. You can go down the whole thing. It's amazing.
It was amazing. So much energy. The only time I kind of noticed that he was 73 is when he tried to jump at the end of something. And I was like, that is not the same jump as it was 20 years ago. But he ripped. Did Jim tell you, Marjorie, how he ripped open his shirt?
But he was mocking him. So when he did that, he was mocking
himself from back in the day. But it's to be quite honest, I haven't totally kept up with Springsteen music, but his show and the E Street Band is unbelievable.
Horns, unbelievable. Horns, all five horns.
All five horns, unbelievable. I love a good fiddle. So getting a little fiddle in there, too. She's amazing. Yeah, it was great.
So as he said that anybody that was complaining about the price of the tickets,
they were very expensive.
They were very expensive.
We sat way, way, way up and paid, I think, $326. Yeah. And it's because of dynamic pricing, right? So in Milwaukee and Kansas City, where I have friends who went, they didn't pay anything close to that. Like $300 got you a really, really good seat. It's just because here, I think people are willing to pay a higher, more premium price.
Well, the good news is you only have to pay $22,000 and you can get a good seat to Taylor Swift. So that'll be good when that comes.
Okay.
I got tickets at face value.
Ooh. So Trenny Casey, graduate of Marquette University. I want to talk to you about Catholic colleges in the March Madness. I mean,
I don't know if we want to talk about Marquette. They were
lost,
knocked out in the second round by the 7th-seeded Michigan State Spartans.
But they've done very well in previous years. Creighton, Xavier, and Gonzaga are still there. Providence College got knocked out early on. But these are little schools, which are powerhouses. Xavier, Georgetown, University of San Francisco, where Bill Russell came from, Loyola, Villanova, St. Peter's. And there was an interesting story about how one of the reasons for it is that the church, which I criticized quite a bit, did not abandon the cities of America. The urban
decades ago.
Yes, in the second half of the 20th century, and basketball is something that doesn't cost very much to do, not like skiing or even football, where you have all the equipment. And that's why all these colleges are still doing so well there.
So
You're laughing.
So I'm laughing because I read the same piece that Marjorie sent me, and I said to Zoe, I said, well, if this is Catholic propaganda, boy, is this Catholic propaganda. As a recovering Catholic and a graduate of Marquette University.
I think it's legit, though.
I mean, yes, the Jesuits in particular, social justice, so Marquette is a Jesuit university. One of the things I liked about it is that service was a huge part of our graduation requirements, theology, philosophy, it was more, and they certainly were very involved. Like Marquette University is right in the heart of Milwaukee. It's right in the center of the city. Georgetown University, right there, and granted a very nice part of DC, but right in the heart of DC. And I do think their service has something to do with it. But if we're being honest, I think what it has to do with is, and this was mentioned in the article, there are only 2 Catholic colleges in the Power 5 that have football, which is Notre Dame and Boston College. I think it's more so they've had success because it is their one and only major sport.
Yeah.
So the resources that you have to give, maybe that was true in the 60s and the 70s, and maybe that helped establish some of these teams as powerhouses, but like the University of San Francisco isn't a powerhouse in basketball anymore. Loyola, they had Bill Russell went. Right. Loyola at times gets in there. The schools in the Big East, I will say, St. John's, Marquette, Georgetown, Providence, I think DePaul.
Rick Pitino's going to St. John's, too.
St. John's.
And Villanova's been in a lot, too.
Villanova, those are all good.
Which is a tiny school.
But they're all in a major conference. They have a major television deal with the Big East and with Fox Sports. And there's no football, so you're not splitting the difference.
Yeah.
All of your donor money, all of your NIL money, all of that now goes to, basketball is the sport there's no other sport to beat. At those colleges. I think that's a bigger reason. While I think it's wonderful that the Catholics and the Jesuits did not abandon the inner cities back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, I think the sustained success now has to do with money.
Speaking of March Madness...
It's also very, very expensive to go to those schools.
Speaking of very expensive, Dan Shaughnessy hit another home run today, talking about the ubiquitous nature, that's an understatement, of these sports betting ads since it was allowed. Obviously, March Madness is a big thing. You may not remember this. Tom Birmingham, who used to be a big shot in the Senate, and he died a couple of weeks ago, when he was in charge of the budget, limited the amount of advertising to the public that the lottery could do. There's no such limitation here, nor while they end these stupid, incessant ads by saying, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800, I have a gambling problem, or whatever the hell number is. What they don't say, why are they not required in the middle to say, by the way, when all things are equal, you're going to lose your money. You're going to have fun doing this thing. They are everywhere. You saw the report last week we discussed. We spent double per capita than other similarly sized states when they initiated sports gambling. You're smiling at me like, get over it?
Well, I'm laughing because
it's okay.
I have 2 sports betting apps. I am on FanDuel and DraftKings.
Did you get your free $200?
So you don't really get $200, right? Like if you bet 5, you get $200 in what they call bonus bets.
What does that mean?
So it's not money that you can take out of your account. But,
Wait, what is it? I thought that was...
So I did too, but I'm not very savvy. Now I am much... I mean, the evolution of Trenny as a gambler in the last week and a half
this is what I'm talking
has
about.
been very fast. But I haven't placed a bet in a couple of days. Oh my God,
wait a second. What's the $200?
It's been a couple of days.
Trenny, every ad says you bet $5, you get $200.
So you don't get $200 cash, right? It's not like you can bet $5 and then you get $200 put in your account. You get $200 what they're called bonus bets.
What are they?
So you can take it. It's like free money. So I've been using it. Like I took it and placed it on futures. So I put like $25.
Futures. Listen to her. She got a little lingo down.
$25 on the Jets at plus 1,600 to win the Super Bowl because I think that Aaron Rodgers is going to go there. So if the Jets win the Super Bowl, because I put $25 down on plus 1,600, I'll win 400. So like those are ways that you can use free money. Now FanDuel, I have $265 in free.
This is exactly why we brought the topic up. By the way.
In free cash. I've used them, some of them for small things, like you learn, like listen, I grew up with not a lot of money. I grew up in a very blue collar family. I put myself through college. Like money was always tight in my house. So I'm careful. I never bet more than $5. Even when I do a bonus bet, like I only usually put like $5 or $10 down. But I can now see how this can become a slippery slope.
Exactly.
It does become addicting. Like last Sunday, not this past Sunday because I was in Vermont, but the Sunday before I was watching the Players Championship.
Golf.
And my husband was at the bar, and he's like, "Wow, Scotty Scheffler's really having a day." I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna put 5 on Scotty Scheffler to birdie the 14th," and then he bogeys it. And I was like,
Is that true?
I was like, "Darn it!" Anyway, I was like, "I'm putting him 10 to birdie. I'm gonna make it back. I'll put $10 on him to birdie the 17th." Pars it. I was like, "Okay, I'm done." I've lost $15. Which, listen, the way I look at it is, I've spent $15 on dumber things in my life, right? But not everybody is in the position, like for somebody who's betting 15 here and 15 there and 20 there, suddenly you look at it and you've bet $150 before you've even known it. I try to do, when I do win, I cash out, I put it back in my account, and then I do, Jim.
Betting on the 14th hole at the Players Championship for Scotty Scheffler.
Okay, but the positive side of it is, for someone who's in my business, and we have talked on this show before about what's happened in media, in particular sports media. It's been gutted. Like if you watch your local sports station, it used to be they had 2 sports reporters, and a sports director, and 2 sports producers. Now your sports departments are 2, maybe 3 people. NBC 10, we are their sports department. So like I do their sports at 6. Michael Holley or Mike Falger do their sports at 11 o'clock. They don't have a department anymore. It's been completely eliminated. Jobs in newspapers, websites, just like news as well, but it's just they've been pared down. And for us, salaries have continued to decrease. With this additional, it's ad money and it's interest, right? Like I would not have I probably would have cared about the players because I watched that Full Swing documentary on Netflix. But for a lot of people, you might not, like they had record numbers this weekend for the first 2 days of March Madness. And I honestly think part of that is tied to the fact that you can now place a $5 bet on, like I placed a bet on Furman to upset Virginia.
Hold on.
I won $50.79.
So you're saying it was bigger this year? The numbers of people watching were more this year in Massachusetts than they have been in previous
Because
years?
they don't care about the games
overall.
anymore. All they care about is the gambling. And she is exactly the role model or unrole model. We're done with this.
I'm the role model for being a degenerate gambler. No, I'm positive.
Sure you are.
I'm
Can
positive.
we talk about bad news?
I'm in the black.
You know what I realized this morning, and you probably realize it better than I, there is almost not a week that you were on the show where there is not a major story about physical, verbal, or sexual abuse of athletes in this country. I don't want to spend a lot of time on Harvard because it's a news story, except to say we spoke about this quote, investigation by Harvard into their women's hockey coach, Bob Holler's great piece a few weeks ago, where essentially Harvard decided to retain her despite the fact that a couple of dozen athletes gave very credible evidence they were abused. The good news is public pressure is built to such a degree that Harvard has now hired an independent, credible outside source to do an investigation and hopefully get to the bottom of it. But a lot of people know the new one, well, it's not new, but there's new evidence.
Yes.
This Jennifer Fox, for those who haven't seen either the TV special.
So I never saw the TV special. Did you see it?
I saw a part of it actually at the time, but I'm embarrassed to say I didn't watch it all. Tell us what the story is and what we learned new this week.
So Jennifer Fox is now, I believe, I'm trying to look at this article so I don't get it wrong. I believe she's in her 40s. She's 40s or 50s now. She was a rower when she was little, and she went away to essentially like a rowing camp for the summer where it was held at someone's home. And she is now, after he has since passed away, accused. She's naming her sexual abuser. So
she was 13
Jennifer
at the time,
Fox
wasn't she?
was 13 years old when she went to this camp. Ted Nash was 40 years old when he was a coach there, and she always thought that their sexual relationship was normal. She actually told a friend about it in middle school. She had asked a friend, "Have you ever kissed a boy?" And the friend said no, and she goes, "I've gone all the way, and I have a 40-year-old boyfriend." And her friend remembers, and has now corroborated this story, that she remembers never thinking, boy, I should tell someone because she seems so confident in it. And Jennifer, it wasn't until she was, I believe, in her 30s, working on a documentary. She ended up becoming a documentary filmmaker. when she was talking to other sexual assault survivors, they were describing exactly what she had gone through, and she'd always assumed she had a boyfriend. And then it was like this revelation, oh no, all those things, all that shame I was feeling, the fear, feeling like she was groomed by the woman who ran this camp, but also Ted Nash. And that, obviously she's 13. Like at 13 years old, you don't have the mental capacity to understand what's going on. If an adult is telling you, this is what you should be doing, this is how you're going to get better, this is how I'm going to be a better coach for you.
Who also happens to be a revered coach, not just an older person.
And a very handsome, charismatic guy in addition. And she talked about the reason she came forward was when she read the obituaries for this guy.
Yes.
And I looked at them last night online, and they were just
glowing.
Absolutely glowing. But then you get the quote in this New York Times piece from the first wife, who said that he was fooling around with a lot of women. She didn't know that they were underage women, but they were a lot of women, and that was the reason.
Well, there was also a 17-year-old quoted in this article. She was 17 at the time, was having, at the same time that Jennifer Fox was being abused by him, she was having, which she says now, at least in this article, was a consensual relationship with Ted Nash. So this was someone who apparently was known as a cheater. Now his second wife, and who was his wife when he passed away, is vehemently denying the allegation. She's wondering why she's bringing it up after he had already passed away. Why would you do this now? But like with all survivors of sexual abuse, there is no good timeline, right?
They do it when they feel they can do it.
They can do it. And everyone's timeline is different. But it goes back to a point Jim makes on this show all the time, which is, how do we let how do we continually let this happen? How do we continually have these issues in sports, whether it's Katie Stone at Harvard, which obviously is not sexual abuse, but it's verbal abuse, hazing, not reporting medical conditions. And it all comes back to one thing, which is that they are highly, highly successful.
Well,
that they have brought accolades to a program.
Exactly.
I think it's something. I think it's something different. I think it's something different.
But people turn their blind eye to
turn people in for this crime for whatever reason it is.
Well, because
they don't want to turn in their relatives. They don't want to turn in somebody they know.
Yeah, but can I add
because
something
the
to this?
priests that got away with it for years, they were not powerful, impressive people.
You're not
Can I
wrong,
add something
Marjorie.
to this, if I may? I was at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the least athletic 6.5 foot tall people. Ted Nash was the rowing coach at Penn.
Yes.
Penn was not the sports.
Was he the rowing coach when you were there?
When I was there. Okay. He was not they were not a sports powerhouse like Penn became in future years, where they became not just an Ivy League sports powerhouse, but whatever. If Ted Nash, who was purely a rowing coach, had said to the president of the University of Pennsylvania when I went there, I would like you to stand on your head for the next week, because he had won a national championship the week before, trust me, they would have done it. The power, I obviously had no idea about any of this stuff. I lasted 2 weeks on the team. The power of these people, whether it's a Ted Nash in rowing, who most people outside the industry haven't heard of, or one of these basketball god coaches that we hear about in March Madness, they rule. They're the highest paid employees at all of these places. Yeah, but you're
forgetting a guy like John Gagan, who probably raped 300 kids.
The priest.
Who is about 5'2" and looked like a leprechaun and had nothing appealing about him at all. Or Father Porter in Fall River.
He didn't have
or
power
Larry
in his
Knight.
diocese? The same kind of power?
But to Marjorie's point, I have a friend who doesn't talk about this often. I think we've only actually discussed it once, maybe twice. She was sexually abused by a family member. And that family member was never ostracized from the family.
People don't want to hear it.
People don't want to hear it.
They don't want to know.
Because it is such a heinous crime that the idea that someone you could know and love could take advantage of a child, it's so disgusting. I think it's hard for people. And if the child seems to push it down and internalize it and just doesn't do anything about it, they think, oh, and they lead. And this person that I know is a wildly successful, otherwise on the surface perfectly functioning human being. You would never know that they were sexually abused.
And you talk to DCF, and you will find, disgracefully, there are mothers who will not turn in the boyfriend.
Boyfriends, fathers,
who was abusing her own children.
In some of those cases, they're terrified for their own lives, right? They are terrified because they have been abused by this person. Maybe not, even if you're married to someone, they can sexually abuse you. Maybe they're physically abused. I mean, there are so many layers to this.
It's got something to do with
we just refuse
sex
to
crimes.
acknowledge.
And I'm not sure what exactly it is. It's something to do with sex crimes, whether it's against women or it's against children.
Can I add another element to this thing, which I think we both had different, well, I think they're complementary analyses of why this is. We only have a couple of minutes, but there's a story in the New York Times interview with Jaylen Brown, obviously a star player for the Celtics, basically saying, he's asked by this reporter for the Times, in an interview in Houston, have you experienced racism a lot of black athletes have in Boston? The answer is, he says, yes. Yeah. He says, yeah, I'm paraphrasing, I'm a superstar, tried to start a business, it's not that easy. I've tried to buy a home. He makes tens of millions of dollars a year. The connection I'm making to the earlier stories we talked about is we have seen the enemy and it is us. Whenever there's a story like this, in an act of masochism, yes. I turn to sports radio, which I generally don't listen to immediately. You know what you hear on sports radio from white people? I've never seen this. Right. I've never seen people by the way, I'd be happy to go into business with Jaylen Brown. The denialism, I don't know if it's only in this community. I lived in New York and Philly. It was never like this kind of endless notion that, why is that one black guy who's making $20 million, what's he complaining about? But I have to say, this is a really troubling interview with this guy.
Yeah, it
Not
is.
about him, but about what's going on here and his experience.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think we understand, and I think what does cross state lines, team lines, whatever, you're always going to have someone like it's happened in Utah, it's happened in LA, it's happened everywhere where people attack race when someone doesn't perform. It's a really disgusting, and most of them do it behind a screen. So it's a really disgusting thing, I think, that happens in politics, it happens in sports, it happens everywhere. But what I wonder if it happens everywhere is, I mean, I had someone ask me yesterday, boy, I guess I always assumed that when you buy a house, it's not about black or white, it's about green, and if you have the money. And I said, but not always. I said, I would like to know, where was he trying to buy? Because it might be in a community that goes, I don't know, look at how he dresses. I know he plays for the Celtics, but you know what happens with those NBA guys? I'm not sure if I want him. I said, there are still these stereotypes that it doesn't matter all the money you have in the world. That does not wipe away what people assume you're going to be like. And it's gross and it's disgusting. And the fact that we refuse to acknowledge it is the worst part.
As recently as 2 weeks ago, we saw what we see every 6 months, a study done by some entity which sent a black couple to apply for a rent, right? Or to rent a place or to buy a place, and a white couple exactly similarly situated other than the color of their skin. Yep. Everybody knows what the end is. And the fact that a white commentator has the audacity to say, I've never seen it, I've never seen a black athlete treated this way, is so pathetically stupid. Sports radio, the morning after the Jaylen Brown thing, I'm turning it on. I'd love to do business with Jay. If he wants to call me, I'll do business with. And you know what the sports, honestly, I don't know if it's a joke or not. If he wants to open a sub shop, I'd be happy to open a sub shop. Oh, sure. That's what I think Jaylen Brown wants to be doing, is opening a sub shop with you. I mean, oh my God. We're going to end on an up note.
We are? Okay, good.
I watched about 20 minutes the other night of something I've never watched before in my life, the World Baseball Classic.
Are you going to watch tonight?
For those, it's the United States versus Japan, with a key Red Sox player playing for Japan.
Masataka Yoshida.
Who's going to be their cleanup hitter, right?
Yeah, he's 13 RBI in the World Baseball Classic. He took a 5-pitch walk last night that helped set up the winning double for Japan. This kid, we've been pretty down on the Red Sox, but if this guy plays up to his potential like he's playing in the World Baseball Classic, the Red Sox may actually have a decent hitter.
But I only have 30 seconds. Let me just say, the joy in these men who are making 10, 20 million bucks for their Major League Baseball, playing for their country is so exciting and contagious and beautiful.
So it's on
incredible.
Tonight, 7 o'clock. Yeah. USA will play Japan, and it'll be Mike Trout plays for Team USA, and Shohei Ohtani plays for Team Japan.
I didn't know that.
So he's not going to pitch, but there is a chance.
They're both on the Angels.
They're both on the Angels. There is a chance that if they need him as a relief pitcher, he could come in and relief, which will be a great moment. But I saw you'll love this. I saw a great suggestion today in The Athletic. Someone said they should stop putting the World Baseball Classic in March during spring training when no one's paying attention. Put it in instead of take a 2-week break like hockey does
for the
All-Star game, and put it in that 2-week break and have that replace the All-Star game.
Brilliant.
Very good.
Brilliant idea.
Can I tell you something? I know your sports taste. You'd love this. The excitement and the enthusiasm is fabulous.
Yeah. What station is it on?
That's a great question.
World Baseball Classic. Just Google it.
Probably Fox, but don't quote me on that.
Good to see you, Trenny.
NBC Sports Boston anchor and reporter Trenny Casey. Coming up next, Justin Silverman is the Executive Director of the New England First Amendment Coalition. We're going to talk to him about our state of Massachusetts. When it comes to public records, we are the worst in the nation, and he's going to tell us why this should matter to you and to everybody. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library. We're streaming on Facebook.com/GBH News.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And the Handel and Haydn Society. Bach's music comes to life as H&H performs his soul-stirring Easter Oratorio, featuring soloists from across the globe, March 31st and April 2nd at Symphony Hall. Tickets at handelandhaydn.org. For 4 decades, Harvey Weinstein tried to silence his accusers. Hear from survivors and industry insiders as Frontline investigates the unsavory tactics used to keep his abuse quiet. Tonight at 10 on GBH2.
I'm Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, head on Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library. Before officially taking over as governor, Maura Healey pledged levels of transparency not seen in years. A few months in, not all think she's there yet. In fact, Massachusetts government as a whole scores worst in transparency. We'll talk about why it matters with Justin Silverman. He's head of the New England First Amendment Coalition. Then in 1969, he sang Amazing Grace at Woodstock. Now he's looking back at his storied career with a ticketed conversation at the Schubert Theater. Folk legend Arlo Guthrie will zoom in.
I'm Marjorie Egan. This past weekend, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum unexpectedly shut its doors after getting word that the celebrated art space was about to be co-opted by climate protesters on the 30th anniversary of the infamous heist. Was their message heard? We'll talk about it with GBH's Jared Bowen. Then it's a look at the latest out of Washington and the Manhattan DA's office with CNN's John King. All that ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Former President Donald Trump cites illegal leaks in claiming he will be arrested today. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has been investigating hush money payments during the 2016 campaign that stem from Trump's alleged affair with adult film star Stormy Daniels. NPR's Deirdre Walsh says so far, Republican lawmakers are largely standing with the former president, who's also seeking another term in office.
Republicans are all hammering the same message. They say Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's investigation is politically motivated, and they say it's an abuse of power. House Speaker McCarthy kicked off the press conference down here for this retreat, fielding numerous questions about Trump's claim that he could get arrested. He was asked about the former president's call for supporters to protest. McCarthy repeatedly slammed Bragg, but the speaker did break with Trump, saying he did not think people should protest.
NPR's Deirdre Walsh reporting. Hundreds of thousands of students in Los Angeles are not in school today. NPR Sequoia Carrillo reports employees are on strike.
The union representing bus drivers, maintenance workers, and other support staff is beginning a 3-day strike today, and the district's teachers are standing in solidarity, effectively shutting down more than 1,000 schools. The strike comes after more than a year of negotiations for pay and staffing increases and expanded health benefits. The Los Angeles Unified School District is the second biggest school district in the country, with more than 400,000 students, the majority of whom live at or below the poverty line and depend on schools for far more than just classroom instruction. The district is working with the city and local volunteers to get students bagged meals, as well as childcare for working parents. Sequoia Carrillo, NPR News.
In Tennessee, big-name artists and drag queens took to the stage last night in response to the state's first-of-its-kind law restricting drag. Mariana Bacallao with member station WPLN has details.
The benefit concert Love Rising featured artists ranging from Grammy-winning singer Jason Isbell to popular Irish folk musician Hozier, all performing in solidarity with Tennessee's LGBTQ community. The message from the performers: the importance of voting. Here's Nashville drag performer Veronica Electronica.
If you want to make sure that LGBTQ plus people are allowed to live, then register and actually go out and vote.
The law, which intends to restrict drag in public spaces or anywhere a minor might see it, goes into effect at the start of April. For NPR News, I'm Mariana Bacallao in Nashville.
On Wall Street, the Dow is up 150 points, or nearly 0.5% at 32,392. The Nasdaq's climbed 80 points. S&P's up 23. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. A Hampden County Superior Court judge has ruled that a lawsuit alleging sexual abuse by a former bishop in Springfield's Catholic diocese will go forward. As New England Public Media's Nancy Cohen reports, the suit is being brought by a former altar boy.
The plaintiff alleges he was raped multiple times in the early 1960s by Bishop Christopher Weldon, 2 parish priests, and other clergy. The suit claims decades later, diocese employees denied the assaults to protect Weldon's reputation. Lawyers for the defendants argued it be dismissed, in part because of the statute of limitations. But the man argues the clock on the limitations didn't start until he recognized the cause of emotional injuries, an argument Judge Karen Goodwin found to be reasonable enough to take to trial. In a statement, the diocese says it's committed to improving the way sexual abuse allegations are handled and remains willing to resolve this matter. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Nancy Cohen.
Actor Tom Hanks will deliver this year's commencement at Harvard University. The university announced this morning that Hanks will address Harvard's class of 2023, which will be held on May 25th. He'll also be awarded an honorary Harvard degree during the commencement exercises. Tom Hanks was also named 1995's Hasty Pudding Man of the Year at Harvard. I actually covered that. Now he'll have a pudding pot and an honorary degree. In sports, the Bruins host Ottawa in the Garden tonight. Celtics are at Sacramento in exhibition baseball. The Red Sox are playing the Orioles.
Support for NPR comes from Angie. Angie's List is now Angie, dedicated to helping homeowners get home projects done well, from everyday repairs to dream remodels. Reviews, pricing, and booking are at Angie.com or on the Angie app. This is NPR.
I'm Henry Santoro, GBH News 89.7.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library. We are streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News. Want me to ask you again about Bruce Springsteen?
Sure.
How is Bruce Springsteen, Jim?
Fabulous.
Fabulous, okay.
Fabulous. Feel free to ask me repeatedly throughout. You heard what Trenny said, too.
She went, too, I know.
It was a big deal.
I'm a loser. I didn't go.
There are about 20,000 other people there, too.
Yeah.
So Governor Healy has pledged to be the most transparent governor in the state's history, which, by the way, would not take much. The executive office has claimed exemption from public records laws forever. But is she living up to her promises made on the campaign trail and since she's been in office? In fact, is any part of Massachusetts government living up to a transparency promise? Joining us now at the Boston Public Library is Justin Silverman. Justin is the Executive Director of the New England First Amendment Coalition. We're thrilled to have you, Justin. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Well, as I understand it, Justin, we are the worst state in the entire nation in terms of transparency. That's still true?
Yeah, it's certainly down on the list.
So what does that mean?
With the public records law specifically, right? Mm-hmm. Every state has a public records law, and it varies state to state how strong that public records law is, how easy it is to get information as a member of the public. Right out of the gate here in Massachusetts, unlike any other state in the country, the judiciary, the legislature, and the governor, arguably, are exempt from the law. No other state exempts those three from their public records law. So right out of the gate, that's a tremendous amount of information, records, documents that we, the public, can't get to give us better insight into how our government operates. And that doesn't even begin to address all of the issues that goes into the public records law with those agencies that are actually subjected to it.
So we're the only state that exempts all three branches of government theoretically, from the public records law. And I believe we're the only state that has a blanket exemption, theoretically, for the executive office for the governor, right? It's one Midwestern state, and us is that Michigan and us. You know, we have spoken to, and I'm sure you know, because we've been citing your stuff, and I hope you've been following us on this too. We have spoken to Governor Healy about this a lot. And in fact, when I asked Governor Healy, was she going to be fully transparent? Was she going to claim exemptions, et cetera, or was she going to be as transparent as she said she was? Her answer was, she interrupted me and said yes and yes to my two questions. Has she lived up to those two yeses since she made them here?
No, absolutely not.
How so?
Well, she told you she was going to make sure that her office was subjected to the public records law, and that hasn't been the case. On her website, you can even see, you can go there right now, you'll see on her website, when it comes to public records, she says this office is not subject to the public records law. Yes, we'll try to be transparent, but we're going to carve out a big exemption on our own. We're going to do this unilaterally. It's not in the law, but we're going to say that if there are any special obligations that the governor has, any particular duties that the governor has that might make it difficult to release information, we're going to not release that information. That's
what is an appropriate exemption for a governor? Forget that language. What would be appropriate language that would make people like you and other transparency advocates happy? There is something that a chief executive does that should be protected or can be protected from the public, no?
Yeah, sure. So I want to make something clear, because I think maybe there's some misunderstanding or misconception about the public records law. Just because an agency is subjected to the public records law does not mean that every single document and record within that agency becomes public.
Right.
There are many exemptions within the public records law, and many of them are there for good reason, right? So think about law enforcement records. You go to your police department, you ask for a particular record, that law enforcement agency can withhold the record if there's an ongoing investigation, for example, when that investigation might be jeopardized by the release of that information. Our public records law has a lot of checks in it to make sure that we can protect information, and those would apply to the governor as well.
Let's do one more public official who's talked a lot about transparency, Mayor Wu. There was a story in the Globe the other day saying, the Globe, I believe it was them, tried to get a whole bunch of stuff, texts, emails, etc. The response was twofold, I think. Please correct me or add if I'm wrong or not complete. One, texting is a transitory thing. We don't have to keep it, even though a couple of experts in the story, and you're an expert too, suggest doesn't matter what the vehicle for communication is, but texting, email, whatever it is, you're responsible for disclosing it. That was one. And two, the contention was they don't even use texting for these purposes. So we asked Mayor Wu about that. She says she does not conduct any work business over text on our show last week. Here's the back and forth.
That is the policy, and so we will.
But is the practice?
No. Yes, it is a practice. I do not conduct work business over my text.
Fair enough. She'd be practically the only one. She says it, so I assume it's true, but she'd be the only one, especially a young politician who work texting, I think, is generally probably more used than antiquated things like email. No?
No, you're absolutely correct. I don't know if it's true or not, but if it is, she would be by far the exception. Most public officials are using text messages to communicate quickly with their staff, with constituents, and with others operating, doing the public business by text, because, quite frankly, it's more convenient than email can be. But I do want to go back to this whole transitory issue, right? That word, text messaging, isn't always just a matter of a simple yes or no answer, a quick conversation, right? I send text messages all the time. I send them from my laptop. I can copy hundreds of words into a text message and send it. I can send documents through text messages. And even if it is transitory, just a simple, brief message that's sent from one party to the other, that can still provide us a lot of context as to how our public officials are doing business. It can provide insight into a much greater conversation that they're having. And despite all of that, they're public records. They should be released. That's the law.
We're talking with Justin Silverman. He's the executive director of the New England First Amendment Coalition. Jim and I talk about this a lot. We're kind of obsessed. I was a reporter for most of my life. But besides the reporters or people like you or people from the ACLU, why should the average Joe and Jane care that we are horrible about public records? How does it affect regular people?
Yeah, so that's such a great question and something that I can't emphasize enough, because I think when it comes to public records, open meetings, when it comes to all of these open government concerns, it's too often framed as it's a journalism issue. It's inside baseball. It's a reporter who just can't get the information that they want and they're cranky about it. That's not the case at all. It's about all of you here at the library with us right now, listening in your cars to the radio. This issue of government transparency affects all of you. We're all stakeholders here. And why? Because we're talking about the power that government has. Ultimately, Governor Healy, a lot of the criticism she's been getting, I think, has been deserved. But ultimately, it's not a Governor Healy issue. It's an issue with the office of governor, regardless of who's in it, making sure that when it comes to the public records issue, we have the transparency that we need to make sure we know what our governor is doing, to make sure that they're making decisions that are serving our interests, the public's interests. And unless we have that kind of transparency, we're never going to know if that's the case. We're not going to have the transparency and accountability that we need to hold our, in this case, governors or mayors or any public official accountable. That makes it in all of our interest to really advocate, promote, and demand that kind of transparency.
You know, we're talking to Justin Silverman. By the way, how do people find your New England First Amendment Coalition if they want to check you out and follow what you're doing? How do they do that?
Thank you. You can visit us online, NEFAC, NEFAC.org, NEFAC.org. We're also on Twitter at 5 Freedoms, spelled out 5 Freedoms.
But you mentioned before police departments, and this is where I think there is a lot of interaction between people. You talked about the Boston Police Department for ages not releasing information about a missing woman that was in East Boston, or you could have some run-in with the police, I don't know, hit and run or a ticket or something like that you might want to get some records about. And my understanding is that lots of times people refuse those records. Certainly the Boston Police Department have refused those records on many occasions. And that could be to your detriment involving some kind of crime.
Yeah, absolutely. We as members of the public, we deserve to know how our law enforcement agencies are operating, whether they're in our communities doing good or whether they're making poor decisions. And unless we know that, then there's not going to be any kind of accountability. I mentioned with law enforcement agency records, one exemption in our public records law is for ongoing investigations. So if a police department, for example, is investigating a case and they determine, well, if we release this record to the public, it's going to jeopardize our ability to investigate this case, under the law, they can withhold that document. And that's an important exemption for law enforcement. It's also one of the most abused exemptions
because the
as well.
investigations can go on for 20 years.
They can. There's a case, I believe it was reported by Todd Wallach several years ago, where the state police are infamous when it comes to the secrecy that they have and their reluctance to be transparent. And they have cited that particular exemption to withhold records regarding a cold case, a murder that occurred, I believe, in the 1950s. No active leads. No, there's no additional information, but they're considering it an ongoing case and refusing to release records.
Well, another good example, we had Susan Zalkine on here a couple of months ago, who's been relentless about the triple murder in Waltham, right?
Preceded the
marathon, which a lot of people think the older Tsarnaev was involved in, and a lot of people, me included, thanks to Susan's wonderful work, believe that if it had been solved and Tsarnaev, the elder, was one of the two people charged with the crime, there wouldn't have been a marathon bombing. The reason I bring that up is there's still records there that Susan's been trying to get in this multi-year investigation that have not been made available. I think Bill Galvin's on the right side of that to his credit. The other thing you didn't mention, this is not a criticism, but just for average people, schedules of politicians, who they meet with and who they don't meet with. You're worried about a decision they make about X, about an oil drilling project. Well, who did they meet with in anticipation of that project?
The entire board of ConocoPhillips.
Well, I shouldn't. By the way, I'm not casting aspersions on Joe Biden. I just mean when a major decision is made that affects your life and the life of your family, who is that executive or that legislative leader meeting with. We're talking to Justin Silverman. Can we talk about a couple of good things that I know that you're working on? I am so with you on this. During COVID, we had remote access to a lot of local legislative bodies, city councils, town meetings, that sort of thing, some stuff in the legislature. What's the status of that, and what are you trying to do?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is to make sure that all of that technology that we used during the pandemic, to make sure that people could still Zoom in or use other remote meeting software to join government meetings, make sure that we're part of that meeting, participating, to make sure that we know what's going on within our government and why decisions are being made. We're really looking to make that kind of technology permanent moving forward. Right now in the state, agencies can or cannot use it, but we want to make it required moving forward. Make that very rare silver lining that we found during the pandemic, this way that we can get access to government in ways that we haven't before. We want to make that permanent in the long run and make sure that those that wouldn't otherwise be able to attend government meetings, and by government meetings I mean a town council, your school board, those that are making decisions about your children, right? Very important decisions.
Or a legislative committee on Beacon Hill where they won't even tell us how the legislators voted on the damn committee thing. Unless you're a tiny little community, Justin, where you can't afford the infrastructure, what is any possible argument against this sort of hybrid kind of system, allowing remote, and if you want to go in person, great, but you can do remote as well? What's the argument against it?
There's no reasonable argument. There are some cases, like you mentioned, where there are maybe some tiny communities where they're understaffed, they don't have enough money, and they might not be able to put that infrastructure in place to have these kind of
So the
hybrid
state
meetings.
gives them money, theoretically,
Yeah,
right?
well, the legislation that I mentioned in my op-ed, addresses this specifically.
How so?
It provides a 7-year rollout for these requirements to occur, though it does require near immediate compliance from some of the larger state agencies and bodies. But for those small community boards that just don't have the money or staff, you have up to 7 years. And during that time, you can apply for a hardship waiver to not have those requirements apply to you. You can apply to the state for funding. This legislation actually creates a fund that will be used for that purpose. So we're really, with this particular bill, removing any kind of excuse that any community or state agency would have to not provide that kind of hybrid access moving forward.
So the newly elected state auditor, Diana DeZaglia, is going to investigate non-disclosure agreements in state government, and that is where someone that says there was sexual harassment or they were wrongly fired or something in exchange for some money agrees that they're not going to say anything about anything that went on. She had to sign one of those when she was accusing people up at the State House of sexual harassment and of her. Tell us what you think about non-disclosure agreements.
I think I'm more interested in knowing when there is a non-disclosure agreement, how many there are and what cases there are these agreements, so we can determine whether or not we should have them in the first place, right? That's where my interest is. It's in the transparency. It's in providing that kind of information to the public so we can all, members of the public, determine for ourselves, okay, maybe in this case a non-disclosure agreement was warranted. Maybe in these cases it's not, because there's too much at stake. There's too much harm that can occur. In the case that you're discussing, perhaps these agreements are maybe they're discouraging people from coming forward, or they're certainly preventing us as members of the public from even knowing that they're happening, right? So I want to get all of this information out to the public so we can make the decision on our own whether they should occur.
Give us a circumstance where a non-disclosure agreement with a government agency using my money to silence someone. They may not consider it silence, but it is silence. Give me an example of where it might be an appropriate exercise of power by the government. I mean, our position, I think we're with DeZaglia. The default position is no NDAs. And then if you want to craft something, not you, if one wants to craft some language as to whether there should be exceptions, we're hoping to have her on in the next few days. We'll talk to her about it. Do you have examples where you think they might be appropriate? It's my money.
It is your money. I do wonder if there are some circumstances where the privacy of the victim might be served with these particular types of agreements. But overall, I think we need to know that these agreements are occurring in what cases so we can determine for ourselves, because it is our money. Are these agreements worth having? Is the benefit of them, if there is any, does it outweigh the potential harm?
You know, Matt Stout, I just want to point out, Matt Stout, in his piece about DiZoglio's efforts, found that in 2011, found that the state agencies, this is quite a while ago, more than 10 years, had at that point sworn scores of workers to secrecy as part of a review of more than 150 severance and settlement agreements. More than half of those included a confidentiality or non-disparagement clause, and 1 in 5 contain both. I guess what I find so upsetting about these is that the money, and we don't know how much money this is costing the taxpayers, and you mentioned the privacy of the person that makes the charge, but then you can't talk about any of the things that happened, which kind of allows the person that did it to get away with it.
Like in the church. Right.
Yeah. I mean, there was a big thing about all these non-disclosure agreements that enabled these priests to go on, abusing children for years. And I think a lot of the lawyers, including McLeish, were sorry about signing these non-disclosure agreements because it allowed this to perpetuate. So I guess that's what she's talking about too.
Yeah, and it prevents all of us from really knowing the scope of the problem. If we don't know about these agreements, if we don't know how many of them there are, the circumstances behind them, then we really have no understanding of what's going on within government, and we have no ability as members of the public to demand any kind of accountability or any changes to prevent these things from happening in the future.
So can we get back to where we began with this abomination that we stand out as the only state in the country where all 3 branches of government claim exemption from public records laws? Marjorie's a big term limits person. I'm not supportive of term limits either, though through the years I'm probably getting closer to where you are because I'm so appalled by so much legislative behavior. But the only way you can get term limits, for example, in Congress, is if Congress starts the process to term limit itself. Is the legislature itself the only vehicle for undoing its blanket exemption, or the judiciary obviously would have to be by the legislature? Is the legislature the ultimate source of power here? If they just simply say no, then we stay in this current state forever?
Yeah, I think the only way we're going to get meaningful change is to actually change the law, which makes it difficult, right? Because we were asking the legislature, those in power, to open themselves up to more scrutiny. And who in power is going to do that? It's the rare legislator that's going to advocate.
I want to get back also to Marjorie's question. In your experience, I know it's convenient for you to say the public does care about this. I get a sense that they don't. I think individual people, when they encounter resistance to something they want,
or they're told it's going to cost them $4,000 to get their records from the state police department, that people are thwarted by not being able to afford to pay for the printing.
And then all of a sudden they have an epiphany because they've had a personal. It's how I live my life to the great degree, unfortunately, also. But the average person gone through their day, this is not, I don't think, high enough on the spectrum of concerns. And I think it's sort of at the root of everything. If your government is not transparent, that's where all the bad crap that you're upset about flows from. So do you disagree that the average person, how many people in the audience here care deeply about issues like government transparency? Could you raise your hand? That was about 5 of you. Okay, you're honest. At least we appreciate that. That's a very small number. Maybe 8 did that. So what do you say to the others who didn't raise their hands?
So I would say that we all care about government transparency. I think the challenge is relating some of these issues to our everyday life. I can tell you that during the height of the pandemic, everybody in my community cared about government transparency because they were all trying to get into various board meetings to understand, well, why are our schools closed and what's going to happen with our kids? Because it affected all of us, right? So it's those issues that we really need to look at to remind ourselves, well, maybe we do care about government transparency more than we're willing to acknowledge here. And another point, too, is that when we're talking about government transparency, we're not just talking about misconduct. We're not just talking about bad decisions made by public officials. We're talking about discouraging all of that, right? The more transparency we have, the less likely these government officials are going to make bad decisions in the first place. So there's a preventative, objective here with government transparency, and that's something that all of us should be rallying around. And you ask, Jimmy asked, what can we do to actually affect like real change? Well, I appreciate all the coverage that the two of you have given to these issues, and I certainly spend every minute of my day advocating for these issues, but ultimately that real change is going to come from all of you listening to the show here at the library, picking up your phone, calling your legislators, and demanding the kind of transparency that we're all
Let me
entitled
tell you,
to.
if we're dependent on these people, we're screwed. I mean, that's it's
I have
pretty
more faith in
obvious
you.
that we are
I have far more faith in you.
One last thing that we were pretty excited about. I think I'm speaking for Marjorie too, even though she was wanted to think a little bit. When the SJC made a unanimous decision, state's highest court last week, that essentially, I know they wouldn't put it this way, but this is accurate, that you are free to be rude and disrespectful at a public meeting. It didn't mean you can be violent or incite violence or that sort of thing. But that, was it Southborough where that came out of? I think it was the Southborough
they had
public meeting.
The person called Hitler, I think they were the
But that was
selectmen.
only after they tried to shut her down. That's
right.
why I'm not defending the use of the term because I don't like it, frankly.
He was Hitler-like. And then the selectman got up and turned off the microphone and called her disgusting. So it was not a good session
So
overall.
before you have to get the Heimlich maneuver, which could be any minute here, can you quickly, while you're breathing, this is a huge and important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a great case. It's a great decision. It reaffirms our right to speak how we want to at these government meetings without someone in government telling us that, no, you're being rude, or in my opinion, you're being offensive. It gives us the right to express ourselves in the way that we need to. When it comes to political speech, as a matter of First Amendment principles and the free speech protections that we have in our state constitution, we have a tremendous amount of freedom when it comes to political speech to express ourselves provocatively, to express ourselves in ways that maybe not everybody finds to be agreeable, right? But we have those freedoms for a reason, because that type of speech is so important to all of us. And that's what that case said. It said that we have the right to speak in ways that other people find rude and offensive, because when it comes to political speech, it's that important that we express ourselves in the way that we feel is most effective.
Jamie, if he expires on the set, we have insurance, right? We're covered?
I'm good.
You're good?
I'm good.
Justin Silverman, you're doing really important work,
Yeah.
and we're really glad to finally meet
Thank you very
Thank
much
you so
for
much for
coming
being
in.
here.
Thank you.
Been speaking with Justin Silverman. He's Executive Director of New England First Amendment Coalition. We very much appreciate his coming in. Coming up next, folk legend Arlo Guthrie is going to zoom in and update us on what he's doing. You're going to want to hear about that. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
The GBH Forum Network. Conversations with experts from every field to discuss the critical issues of our time.
In some ways, today's retirees are better off than the people who are now in their middle ages.
And bring new perspectives to the table.
Now, the future is not yet written, and the choices that we make as a nation today are going to have a lot of effect on what happens.
You can watch and learn more at youtube.com/GBH Forum Network.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And The Huntington, presenting Clydes, nominated for 5 Tony Awards, including Best Play. The comedy comes to the beautifully restored Huntington Theater from March 24th through April 23rd. Tickets at huntingtontheater.org. And Rockland Trust Bank, dedicated to providing advice and support to the community for over 115 years. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I'm Jim Browdy. She is Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News. You're listening to the official folk song of the Commonwealth, the great Arlo Guthrie's Massachusetts. On Saturday, April 1st, singer, songwriter, activist, illegal garbage dumper Arlo Guthrie will be at Bach Center's Schubert Theater, kicking off his 4-part series, What's Left of Me, I love that, with stories and conversation led by questioning from Grammy Museum Executive Director Robert Santelli. An exhibit of Arlo's life and career debuts the day before at the Bach Center's Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame. But right now we're joined by that icon and longtime pride of the Berkshires via Zoom, Arlo Guthrie. It's great to meet you, Arlo. Thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So, as Jim said, I love the name of your tour, the What's Left of Me event.
Well, at this age, you got to think of something fun. I mean, that's about it.
Exactly. So, what are people gonna get when they go? Elaborate on what Jim said to the Bach Schubert Center on April 1st. What's the deal?
Well, if I knew, I'd tell you. But I think I've never done this before. So it's new to me. And what it is I realized a couple of years ago that my voice ain't what it used to be and stuff like that. But I had a great run, so there was no complaints about it. But I got bored sitting around, and so I thought I'd try to do something. So my wife, Marty, and I came up with a plan to re-enter the workforce, as it were, and we're going to try these conversations with my old buddy, Bob Santelli, who you introduced, and see how it goes. It's really a conversation, and it might be a couple of tunes or something, but most of it will be new to me, and so therefore new to everybody.
So essentially, I mean, what great things you are, I know this will come as no shock to you, Arlo Guthrie, you're a fabulous storyteller, which is what great music, great living is all about. I assume we're going to be treated to some stories about you, your parents, that some of us probably didn't know before. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, it is. I remember when I first started out, it was right after I played the Club 47 back in those days. It's
Club Passim now, Harvard Square, sure.
Right. But it was in 1966, and I went to Chicago, and I was up there trying to, between songs, you're changing capos, you're retuning, you're doing all kinds of stuff. And I didn't want to just leave the audience watching me do that, so I started talking. And eventually, it got to be habitual. And maybe that's part of the Irish, I'm not exactly sure. But whatever it was, somebody yelled out, "Shut up and sing." And I thought, okay. So I sang some more songs. Well, it wasn't long after until Alice's Restaurant came out the following year. And I was doing a lot of songs. And somebody yelled, "Shut up and talk." And I realized that you can't please everybody, but you have to do a little bit of both. And so I've tried to make the best of it for the past 50 years.
Arlo Guthrie, I'm so glad you brought up Alice's Restaurant, because I was there. I told Marjorie, I was at a Joni Mitchell concert years ago where someone screams out, "Sing a Case of You," and her response is, "No one ever asked Van Gogh to paint a starry night again." So, but based upon what you're saying, I assume you don't have problems talking about it. When you created Alice's Restaurant, 18 and a half minutes long, did you think there were even going to be 3 people who were going to listen to this thing?
I had no idea. And of course, Van Gogh isn't around, but if he was around these days, I guarantee you somebody would ask him to paint those pictures.
Probably true.
We're living in different times. But Alice's Restaurant began just on a whim. It was funny that I had received a call from the local police chief, and it made me laugh. And so I started writing this little ditty, and it took about a year of playing with it on stage to refine it to the point where it ended up usable as a record and as a performance piece. And so I was, it's not something that I could have repeated easily because, like you said, it's almost 20 minutes long. So what I did was I decided to compromise and rather than not do it at all, I would do it occasionally, every 10 years, whatever it was. And so, and when you're doing it on tour, it takes 2 years. So, every 8 years or so, I would bring it out again, put it back on the menu. And I think the last time we did that was, I don't know, probably 2015 or 16. And it was so popular again because a lot of people hadn't heard it yet.
Well, you know what else? Hey, but Arlo, I hate to do this to you, but you know what a lot of our young listeners haven't heard? When you mentioned a minute ago, you got a call from the police chief, they're probably saying, why did he get a call from the police chief? And how did that...
Because he was a litterer, that's why.
Can you briefly tell the story
that led... The story. And by the way...
Look, wait, stop. You can't tell the whole freaking story. But because it takes 20 minutes.
Exactly.
That's right.
I told it better, in years past. But basically, the summary is that at the time, back in 1965, 66, you were either the son of a politician or a well-placed person, or you were going to college, or you had some other reason not to be sent to Southeast Asia.
That is right.
And so the fact that I was arrested for littering that disqualified me from going, I thought was ridiculous. I thought it was funny, and I still think it's funny. And so if you're a young person who'd never heard the story, that's what I'm talking about. That's why we did it, not just for the 50th anniversary, but continued to do it until my retirement a couple of years ago.
Well, I read, the Globe did a great piece a few years ago about the 51 things about Arlo Guthrie's Alice's Restaurant that you might not know. And one of them I learned in that piece was that you don't listen to it on Thanksgiving. Your family doesn't listen to it. But a lot of us have listened to it every Thanksgiving forever. I listen to it, then my kids listen to it. I got a grandkid now, should be listening to it soon because it's just one of those classics. But I tell you what, there's a lot I didn't know. I didn't know that the police chief was a model for Norman Rockwell and some of his great paintings that he did. I didn't know that. I didn't know you threw a deep...
Not only that, but Bill Obenheim was the chief of police in Stockbridge, who
Obie.
I renamed Officer Obie in my song.
Mm-hmm.
And the following year, the song came out as a record in 1967 or so. In 68, I got another phone call from another local Stockbridge resident, a guy named Arthur Penn. And Arthur Penn had just finished directing Bonnie and Clyde, I think it was. And he called me up. He said, Arlo, I know most people listening to this song are thinking you made it up. But I live in Stockbridge, and I know these people. So I got to make a movie of it. So not only did Officer Obie pose for Norman Rockwell, he plays himself in the film. The cop in the film that we made, decades ago, is the real cop. There's a blind judge, Judge Hannon, who was a real judge, and he plays himself in the film. These are real people. It's not a Hollywood hack job on some version of reality. The only problem was that the song was only 20 minutes long and a movie has to be 90. So you got to make up 70 minutes of stuff, and they did a fair job, but I didn't think it was all that great, so I don't watch it. I listen to the song occasionally when I have to.
It's a great song. Great song. It's a very funny song.
We're talking to Arlo Guthrie, by the way, who on Saturday, April 1st, will be at Bach Center's Schubert Theater, kicking off his series, What's Left of Me, and based on the last 10 minutes, there's quite a bit left of him. It'll be a conversation with, as we said, Bob Santelli from the Grammy Museum, actually a Bruce Springsteen connection, too. Check it all out.
The other little tidbit I learned, and we're going to talk with GBH arts editor, executive arts editor Jared Bowen about the new movie, The Boston Strangler, is that the actual Boston Strangler, Albert DeSalvo, wrote to Alice Brock, owner of the restaurant, asking if the restaurant would consider selling the choker necklaces he was making in prison. My God.
You're making this stuff up.
I'm not. It's in the Boston Globe. I'm reading it right here. You didn't know this? I tell you, you should check it out.
I think he knew it.
Alice Brock
I did not know it.
Well, she declined. She was not going to have any part of Albert DeSalvo's creepy notions. And
Hey, Arlo, I would suggest you read up before April 1st so you're prepared for this thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't want to. I know. I think too much already. I would just as soon go and see what happens with what I already know, rather than stuff myself full of stuff that I never knew before.
Yeah, knowledge is dangerous.
Maybe you know this one, that Bob Dylan gave you your first lessons on the harmonica?
Yeah, that's kind of a tricky one. Actually, he visited my house when I was 13. The house I was living in, it wasn't my house.
Yeah.
And I invited him in because I liked his shoes. Nobody had heard of him yet. And we played harmonicas together. And he was the one that showed me some little tricks that I had never put together before. But I was already playing the harmonica. It's just that I played it in my father's style, which was fairly simple. And Bob knew some tricks, although it didn't really help his harmonica playing in the long run.
Whatever happened to him, by the way?
He's still around.
He's still around? Okay. You know, speaking of the dreaded local angle, which on television about 3 or 4 months ago, I had Ken Casey, the leader of the Dropkick Murphys, on. Have you heard their album of your father's stuff, This Machine Still Kills Fascists? Have you heard it?
Of course.
What do you think of it?
My sister helped put that together. My sister Nora.
Yeah.
And she made me listen to it.
What'd you think?
I loved it. I like the Dropkick Murphys. They're having fun.
They are having fun, and apparently so is Arlo Guthrie. So Arlo, I want you to know I have 2 almost connections to you. One, when my kids were young, we read Mooses Come Walking to them.
Oh, no.
Do you remember you actually wrote
as
that?
As an author as well?
As an author as well. Plus, I've seen you at Farm Aid, which is one of the great days and one of the great causes, Willie Nelson and his troops, and you were absolutely spectacular, and people loved you, I should say. So if you didn't know it, I can tell you as an audience member, they felt it. You know, speaking of storytelling, everybody knows, I think, almost everything about your father. I didn't know virtually anything about your mother and her career until we were reading and talking about you last night. Tell us a minute about the parent that we don't know much about, Arlo Guthrie.
My mom was an incredible gal. She was out of high school. She went to dance for the Martha Graham Company, which was, if people don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. But it was one of the first really prestigious modern dance companies in the world.
Very big deal.
And so my mother danced in the Graham Company for years and eventually became Graham's assistant. And she was the first one outside of the Graham Company that was authorized to teach the Graham method. And so my mother started her own dancing school in Brooklyn, New York, and she was the breadwinner. You know, my dad was running around writing songs, but nobody was listening to him back then, and so he wasn't making any money. And even if he had, he gave it all away. So he was useless as a breadwinner. It was my mother that really put everything together, collected all of his works, created the archives that are now in Tulsa, and part of the exhibit that is being shown in Boston is from the Tulsa Museum. And I think, you know, a lot of times there are people who go unrecognized. And who really deserve to be known. My mom's one of them. You know, and I'm so proud to be her kid.
I can tell. And speaking of that, well, another thing I learned about you, I thought I knew a lot about you. By the way, I brag a lot, Arlo, about being #1 in my bar mitzvah class. When I heard that you were bar mitzvah this morning, I was so excited. I was vibrating. How'd you do at your bar mitzvah?
I did awful.
And why was that?
I mean, it was really an excuse. I mean, okay, here I am, 13 years old. I don't know much. The rabbi that was teaching me was named Meir Kahana. Do you know who that is? Yes.
The Meir Kahana?
The Meir Kahana. Right. So he was a failure as a teacher as far as I was concerned, but he was great at bombing things.
Yes, he was.
Anyway, so
wait a minute, I don't know. Tell us who this is.
He's a radical in the what decade should we talk about? And a revolutionary radical. Was he not? What decade?
60s.
60s, yeah.
Wow.
But go ahead, Arlo. Sorry.
Anyway, so they bring me to a loft on 2nd Avenue in New York City, which is the cheap part of town, and we had a party. They called it a bar mitzvah, but it was really a party. And the great thing was that my dad was brought in from the hospital. And so as soon as he walked in the door, everybody was, that's Woody Guthrie. And so they all gravitated to him and left me alone. So I was sitting there thinking, I'm going to get out of this alive. And somehow I did.
I would have bumped, said, Telly, ask you about that. You referenced a minute ago that some of your father's stuff is going to be part of this new terrific thing just started a few months ago at the Bach Center. I think the first exhibit was this fabulous array of photographs of Dylan. Speaking of Dylan, again, this is the Folk Americana Roots Hall of Fame. That exhibit's going to open the day before you do What's Left of Me on April 1st. What are people going to see there at this Roots Hall of Fame, Arlo Guthrie?
I'm not exactly sure, except that my daughter Annie has been coming and stealing my stuff, which tells me that some of it is going to end up in some kind of exhibit. And a lot of it, of the stuff that's showing up in Boston, was previously on display at the Woody Guthrie Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So it's going to be some kind of, I'm trying to stay away from it. I mean, you know, when you start getting Lifetime Achievement Awards.
That's right. That's right.
You know you're pretty much nearing the end of your life. So I don't want to involve myself too much with it. I'm happy it's happening. I think it's great. It'll be a lot of fun for people, especially, people who are interested. But for me, I already lived that. And I already did.
And by the way, for people who aren't interested, they probably won't want to go. I should want to be clear about that.
So I want to know, since we're talking to you on Zoom, since I've always wondered about this, you had an awful lot of garbage that day up on Thanksgiving in Stockbridge. You had a couch and all these bottles and all these boxes. Apparently, you almost filled up the red micro VW minibus there.
You committed a crime.
Yeah, and dumped it on this poor guy's property. I guess he was upset about that. Why did you have all this stuff, a couch and everything else? What was that all about?
It wasn't nearly, I embellished the story a little bit.
That's what he says now.
All right, that's good. So you didn't really have a couch?
There was a couch.
Oh, there was a couch, okay.
And probably some 2x4s and some bottles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But all of this stuff was in the old Trinity Church.
Yep.
That friends Ray and Alice Brock, who you mentioned before, were living in at the time, which has since become the Guthrie Center. It's our place where we've been for 30 years. And so all of the stuff was sitting there when I came up with my friend Rick Robbins, who's still around. He's still my friend. And I think it was Alice that asked us to just take it to the dump. Okay. So we loaded up the stuff in Ray's red VW. It wasn't mine. In the movie, they made it mine. Okay. So the dump was closed. And because it was Thanksgiving.
That's right. What could you do? What could you do?
What could I do?
Exactly.
I mean, it wasn't like I put it on some guy's property, like you said. I mean, there was already a bunch of stuff there. And I thought, okay, another couch or some 2x4 ain't going to make a difference.
Okay.
But it was obviously destined to be otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And then you wound up on the bench with the mother rapers and the father rapers and all that kind of stuff there at the police.
And one of those guys was sitting in the old age home or something like that just recently. Another friend of mine that worked with me for years saw him, and he said, "Oh, my claim to fame is I was on the Group W bench with Arlo."
Doesn't get much better than that.
Still around.
Hey, Arlo, we know you've had some health stuff. You look fabulous. You sound fabulous. And we're really excited to have you in town on the 1st. So thanks for your time today, and we really appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Great Arlo Guthrie.
We've been speaking to Arlo Guthrie on Saturday, April 1st. He's going to be at the Bach Center Schubert Theater, kicking off this 4-part series, What's Left of Me, with stories and conversation led by Grammy Museum Executive Director Robert Santelli. Plus, the exhibit of his life and career debuts the day before at the Wang Theater's Americana Roots Hall of Fame. For more information to get tickets, you go to thebachcenter.org. That's thebachcenter.org. And for information on the exhibit at the Americana Roots Hall, the website is folkamericana.rootshalloffame.org. Thank you again, Arlo Guthrie.
Thank you, Arlo
It was a big
Guthrie.
thrill.
Great.
Coming up. GBH Executive Arts Senator Jared Bowen joins us to talk about he's going to talk about the Garden Museum closing this past weekend because of a climate protest, and he's also going to talk about the Boston Strangle, the new movie. He's next. That's Jared Bowen on Boston Public Radio 89.7.
Hey, John, keep playing this for a minute, will you?
On much of Germany's Autobahn network, you can drive as fast as your car can go. But a movement to introduce a blanket speed limit is gaining momentum, and that is leading to some soul-searching.
The Autobahn is connected to a Nazi idea that, like, all Germans are a harmonious nation.
More on the Autobahn's place in German culture on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Emerson Colonial Theater, presenting Into the Woods, the Tony and Grammy Award-winning Broadway musical is coming to Boston March 21st through April 2nd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com. And Comcast Business, offering internet solutions with Comcast Business Internet for your small business. Includes Comcast Business Security Edge and internet speeds up to 10 gigs. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply, actual speeds vary.
Trusted. Local. News. You're listening to 89.7 WGBH, HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News. I just checked the text. We're getting a lot of texts from people saying what's happening with this indictment. I have no idea. Nothing has been announced. If there's an indictment out of Manhattan of former President Donald Trump, we will obviously bring it to you live. And even if it hasn't happened by 1:20 when John King joins us, he will give us the latest. But first, we're joined now by GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. Jared is the host of Open Studio with Jared Bowen, which you can catch Friday nights right here on GBH 2. Hello, that's the station. Hi, Jared. How are you?
It's great to be. I'm great to be. What?
Whatever.
Yeah,
Let me try that again. He is Jared Bowen, host of GBH something something. Jared, it's good to see you.
I'm well. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for being here.
So, Jared,
by the way, wasn't Arlo Guthrie charming?
He was great.
I thought he was great.
Yeah, he was great.
He was terrific.
I loved talking to him. He was wonderful. I mean, we've been to a lot of Tom Rush shows, and he sings, but he also tells great stories, and it's part of the whole
Club
deal.
47 too.
Yep.
That's the Dylan and Rush and Guthrie and all those people.
I love those
Joan
gray
Baez.
curls.
Yeah, he looks great.
So anyway, Jared Bowen, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum shut down on Saturday because they found out that these climate activists were going to protest inside the institution. So give us the backstory.
So the backstory, we've talked about this on the show. In fact, Marjorie, I think you and I have gotten into it.
Yeah, that's right.
We had a little fisticuffs about this, about the fact that the climate activists have been targeting museums around the world, basically making the argument that we're in such dire straits with the climate and global warming that we are facing not having the planet and therefore no art, and this is why they're focusing on museums. So this group, it's called Extinction Rebellion Group, which espouses nonviolent, disruptive civil disobedience as a way to gain attention to climate change issues because, as they argue, nothing else is working, targeted the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum this Saturday. And their plan was to, on the anniversary of the theft, to hang works in the empty frames and to stage a die-in inside the courtyard. The museum got wind of this and closed, and 900 people who had their tickets to enter the museum that day had to be refunded. So that is...
Jared is getting aggravated as he's telling the story. So you can tell you're with the museum big time, correct?
Well, let me look at
especially on the anniversary of the theft, which I would imagine is a difficult day for the museum.
Yeah, if we're to break apart the strategy here, first of all, yes, they target on a day that people within the museum still are you can tell they're very emotionally and viscerally affected. Masterworks from this museum have been taken and they've never been returned. So this is already a tough day. You're also going into a museum which is LEED certified, which means they've done what they're supposed to do to be as aware of environmental impact as possible. This is an organization that we know they have their beautiful courtyard in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They have done everything they can to make it organic, 100% organic. I look at the extension of this and what happens when the museum closed. So I called the museum yesterday. They did pay their staff, ultimately. I wondered, are the people who work at Cafe G, the wait staff, are they still getting a Saturday's worth of tips? The museum called me back last night and said now they do have their tips for that Saturday. We're talking about a museum that lost months and months and months of income during the pandemic. Also that these climate protesters can stage a protest in a museum that has little to do with climate change. You think of what bullies do, and they target the most vulnerable who don't necessarily have the means to fight back. I wonder about that comparison in this case.
Well, you know what? When it was in my hometown and a museum I'd been to a bunch of times, it suffered this terrible tragedy, this loss of paintings. I was on the museum side too, I must admit. And I'm also rethinking the whole idea of targeting art museums because...
Well, they would say they're not targeting art museums.
Well,
they're targeting climate...
But they are, in the sense that I mean, we have a protest going on now, the Bill McKibben thing. They're outside of banks. They're outside of banks. And the reason is because banks are the people that that lend money to these big oil companies to have these big oil installations, which we can't afford to have anymore. So I'm not sure I'm down with the art museums anymore because it seems like I don't think it works.
You mean the opposite? You are down with the art museums. You're not down with protests
I'm down with the art
museums.
museums. Yeah, because even though last time we talked about this, we did have a kerfuffle about this because I thought, well, gets some attention. But other things can get them attention, I think, besides art museums.
And the reason, let's be clear, that the museum closed is because they had to evaluate, the security of the works and the security of visitors that day because they didn't know how many people would ultimately be moving through the museum. Yes, there are empty frames where they may have tried to hang the works, but those are antique frames. Right now, if you go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, you'll see that the courtyard is stanchioned off because there are works of art in the courtyard. There's a mosaic on the ground floor. Jim and I actually shot in the courtyard once.
One of our finest moments.
Which was a luxury, but of course, everything was completely controlled about where we could stand, where our videographer would be, where the lights would be. If you have 30 people rushing into the museum, that cannot be controlled. So they had to make the decision, safety of the museum and patrons versus access, and unfortunately they had to shut down.
The only thing I want to say about this, because I don't want to get in a fight today again about this, is first of all, I assume nobody, including the demonstrators from what I understand, wanted to damage art. I mean, there was your deep concern with some of the soup throwing or mashed potato throwing or whatever the hell it was. Some other museums, there might have been damaged art, and no one should support that. Having said that, your thing about the Globe story in particular, and you mentioned it too, was some people came from out of town, they really wanted to do this. The only way any protests ever get any attention, serious attention, is when there's inconvenience caused for people. And I know what you're going to say. You don't like it when you're inconvenienced, Jim. You are 100% right. It happened to me with the cyclists in Harvard Square. We talked about it. When I was screaming, it turned out it was our producer's sister, not this producer, but a former producer. But the reality is that's what gets play, is when people are inconvenienced.
You know what occurred to me as I was thinking about this too? Okay, so 900 people couldn't go to the museum. Some of them did show up. Did they drive there? Does that mean they have a second drive back to the museum when they can actually go on a day that it's opened? That's not really fossil fuel friendly, is it? When you're having the museum shut down so that people have to make double the gas consumption.
Oy is all I can say. Okay, let's move on for this because we are going to get into a thing. We're talking to Jared Bowen. We spoke the other day, Jared, to Matt Ruskin, who's a local guy. He's from Watertown, actually. Here's a clip from his Boston Strangler. He's the writer and director. Here's a clip from, is this from the thing or is it from him with us? I'm sorry. This is, what's the first thing here? I'm sorry. Is this from Ruskin or is this from the...
Don't ask me.
Okay, let's hear from Ruskin first. My apologies for not reading this carefully. Here's the director with us last week.
3 murders in the summer of '62, and then there were no victims for several months. And then the pattern changed. At one point, younger victims started to turn up. So it was this very puzzling and very horrifying murder mystery that really gripped the city.
And obviously there was an earlier version of this with Tony Curtis, which is sort of timely since his kid just won an Academy Award, even though he was nominated and hadn't won. What did you think of the movie?
So I have mixed feelings about this movie. First of all, it's just beautifully shot, and it looks gorgeous. He has this whole palette for 1960s Boston,
yes,
which is
old cars.
Exactly, and just putting the architecture of the city in such this really interesting, great light. But unfortunately, I felt like this was several movies. Any one of them would have been really fantastic. But ostensibly, he made this movie. He's somebody who's talked about not wanting to glorify violence. So instead, he focused here on 2 women reporters, Loretta McLaughlin and Jean Cole, who, in days where women didn't have a lot of voice in the newsroom, and in fact, Loretta McLaughlin was stuck on the lifestyle desk testing toasters when she wanted to get onto this story, because she started to recognize that, yes, there was a pattern here of women being strangled within the greater Boston area. So she teamed up with Jean Cole for the Record American, which ultimately became, Marjorie, as you know, the Boston Herald, and started to chase this, and McLaughlin is also credited with coining the name, the Boston Strangler, because the city and the police, the administration was at pains to not acknowledge that this was actually a serial killer, because of course people were terrified that this kept happening. And so this story is about those 2 women, but it is also about the murders, but it's also about what I think many people may not realize is that there's huge question about who the Boston Strangler or Stranglers were. So then we move into different territory about trying to untie what actually happened in that period. So because it's many different films, while interesting, I just wish it had settled in one direction.
Let's hear a little bit from the trailer this time. And the first, 2 of the voices you'll hear are not those women reporters, as they were called, those girl reporters, as they were called at the time, Jean Cole and Loretta McLaughlin. Here it is.
Another woman was strangled. Just came over the wire.
I'm killed in the follow-up. You don't have a story.
How many women have to die before it's a story?
They just confirmed number 4.
Police aren't talking. Never seen them this tight-lipped about anything.
I don't care if it's 1 killer or 4. We're gonna catch whoever did this. You have your suspect! Boston Police, hands on the wall.
That voice in the middle was Chris Cooper, local guy, Academy Award winner.
Great, as always. He's so great in every film.
I think the story, you said too many stories all at once. The story about the women reporters, I mean, I think most of us...
I loved it.
I loved it too. Now, for those, and I actually did a little bit of research just to see what was real. Because what's the opening say we talked to him about?
Started out in the Midwest.
No. Inspired by a true story.
Correct,
so we asked him what that meant, and it meant literally inspired, but not a documentary as such. Not only were they called girl reporters, they put the photograph in the paper of the 2 of them because they knew their pretty faces, according to the editor, would get more clicks, what the equivalent of clicks was buying the newspaper. And it's a wonderful story about fabulous reporting work and the incredibly discriminatory treatment that women got. And you know what the other thing that stuck with me? And I don't know, I said this to Marjorie, I'm not sure if I said it on the air. If a guy does something modest, most of us brag about it for our whole lifetimes. I knew Loretta McLaughlin, not well, but fairly well, as the editorial page editor of the Boston Globe. I had a lot of interactions with her when I was running the tax reform nonprofit. I had no idea that this woman had been such a pivotal part of the history of the city. As Matt Ruskin said to us, they didn't call them serial killers then, serial killers. And by the way, the one last thing I'll say is the one thing we do know with certainty, because DNA not so long ago, is Mary Sullivan, is that her name? Yep. I think the 13th victim was killed by Albert DeSalvo. What's up in the air still is what happened to the prior 12.
Well, 2 things I want to say about this. One, also, we mentioned Chris Cooper. I'll also mention Nancy Carroll, a really beloved local actor. She was extraordinary. She passed away recently, but you get to see her in
What's
this
she play in
film.
this?
She plays Loretta McLaughlin, Keira Knightley's mother.
Oh, she's great. She's great.
Isn't she? I mean, every frame,
She's
just like
great,
she was on stage, infinitely compelling. But I think the interesting thing about this, and hopefully this film will help serve its purpose, in that how many cases are now being uncovered because of DNA evidence and because of these ancestry tests and all of the available material out there, that a lot of these murders are still cold cases that theoretically can be solved, as we see happening with the Golden State Killer and others around the country.
And by the way, it's on Hulu. It's not in the theaters, but if you're a Hulu subscriber,
but you know
can
why
check it out.
I love it? Because great scenes of Boston, great Boston accents. Chris Cooper is great in every movie. Love to see him. And I just love that, you know, I'm sorry that Loretta McLaughlin and Gene Cole aren't around to see because they both passed away, to see their efforts on the big screen. And of course, I spent most of my life in newspapers, so of course I love stories about girl reporters, since I was a girl reporter myself for quite some time. So I just, How
many women reporters at the Herald and women columnists when you started?
Well, I was the first woman columnist, news columnist.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, well, there weren't many. I was terrible, and I had to leave, and then I came back. I was too young, but I left and came back, and I was better when I came back. But there were not many. Even in the 80s, there were not very many women.
How about news reporters? Not.
That's what I mean. There were not very many women. There were two of us.
Either.
There were two of us in the newsroom that were women.
That
when
is
I went
incredible.
to the Boston Herald, yeah. And but that's changed obviously now. But then these women were there in the 60s, so I can't even imagine what it was like for them in the 60s. It must have been absolutely horrible, because 20 years later, it wasn't that much better.
And not only dealing with their newsroom, but having to deal with the police and making their way into the police. Because, of course, all of the male reporters had their built-in, baked-in relationships, so that's how they got their scoops. And then these were women who had to earn that on their own while being judged the entire time.
Well, I also loved it because one of the male reporters was a guy named Eddie Corsetti, and Eddie Corsetti was still at the Boston Herald when I was at the Boston Herald. He was a legendary police reporter, and his son, Paul Corsetti, was a police reporter as well. So, you know, those are the people that when you didn't know where the Suffolk County Courthouse was, they had a good laugh over that kind of thing.
In any case, I think it's worth watching. Boston Strangler on Hulu, local guy, writer and director Matt Ruskin. We're talking to Jared Bowen.
So tell us about Leslie Moyse's Kissing.
Kissing.
It's Kissing. I loved this play. This is one of those that you want to finish listening to the segment and then stop and get your tickets and go immediately. It is hilarious, and it's sweet, and it's joyous. It's just, it's one of those great nights in the theater where everything comes together. The night I saw it for opening night last week, there was magic in the audience too, because the audience was so responsive. It was just spectacular fun. But this is playing at the Huntington through April 2nd, and we find Lala, who is about 15 years old. We see her transitioned into 16, all played by adult actors, and she kind of finds this relationship with this young man, and she kind of works her way through it. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable. They find each other. He goes off to college, so then she takes up with his twin brother and finds her way again. But what I think the joy in this piece is it's really a series of duets, because you see Lala with these two young men, and then you see her parents come together and them looking at their own first love that ultimately produced Lala. And I think there's so much that we recognize in ourselves when you see this played out on stage. And even though we're looking at 15 or 16-year-olds, because they're adult actors, it really could be any age, because does anyone actually ever master relationships and first dates and first kisses, and how do you make the next move? And as I keep saying, because it is just so joyous, it was fun and unfailingly funny, and it roots around in all of that messiness of early romance, and then surfaces with something that just leaves you soaring when you leave the theater.
Oh, and it's a world premiere.
This is a world premiere. It's written by Linnell Moyes, who is the poet laureate out in Northampton, I believe, but grew up in Cambridge. And so it feels like a very local story, and it bounds around between Burger Palace and the museum, because she's a young budding artist, and Up in Trees, thus Kissing.
Oh, it comes from the kid thing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from?
Yeah. So it's so sweet.
Oh, Kissing in the Tree, Kissing.
Exactly.
First comes love, then
because marriage, then comes somebody around in the baby carriage. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I hadn't done that one in a while.
No, I haven't done that
that's how it turned out
either. Okay. Is that what you saw first when you were a kid? No, you saw Don Quixote.
Oh,
couldn't
Don
have seen
Quixote.
his
No, I
because
didn't
this is
see
just
the
a world
ballet. I want
premiere.
to talk about. No, I saw Man of La Mancha.
Man of La Mancha,
which obviously
okay.
we'll talk about that in a second. So Boston Ballet's Don Quixote is sort of their core thing. It's back again.
It's back. It's been 10 years. And there's a great history to this piece because this is Rudolf Nureyev's Don Quixote. And he started...
He's alive, right?
No,
he's passed away.
He's long dead.
Many years ago.
He's long dead?
I think
Yes.
1993. Yeah.
Oops. Sorry.
And but he's somebody who grew up
Missed
dancing Don Quixote, and this is the ballet that is really, while it's taken, of course, from the great story. And Don Quixote, in the first act, we find him waking from a dream, and he needs to go find this woman that he wants to rescue in his dream, and we carry on his travels. It's less about him, though, as this young couple whom he finds, and we see their first love, speaking of first love, coming together. But Nureyev played the younger character, Basilio, as he was coming up and had always danced it, and then eventually took it over and choreographed it himself and did it with Boston Ballet. And I think the company would argue it's really what helped put them on the map. Audiences started paying attention to them when they had Nureyev dancing with them. International audiences started paying attention to Boston Ballet. And so we see his choreography intact in this really lush, gorgeous production. I saw it the other night. Jeffrey Serio, who has returned to Boston Ballet, was dancing that main part. Really, really exquisite. They have sets that remind me of Velázquez and Goya, very colorful and vibrant. And this is also a very grand piece, especially in some of the dream sequences when you have so many company members on stage. It's a really big ballet. And so I think it was very wise and an apt time for Boston Ballet to bring it back.
Okay, so let's talk about me.
Hold on for
Sorry
one.
to say what.
I just want to ask you, because I wasn't clear from the story. Did Rudolf Nureyev dance with the Boston Ballet?
He did.
He
yeah.
did.
Yes.
So that must have been a huge, because he at the time was probably the most famous ballet dancer on earth.
Yeah, it was one
and
of.
he came
yeah.
here.
And I was thinking, it's
Why
one of
did
those
he do
things.
that?
I don't know, but probably because he loved the piece so much, and it was. I think before he ultimately settled with the Paris, the major ballet company in Paris.
Yeah.
But
he was Russian, obviously.
He was doing this here.
Oh, really?
Ha ha ha.
So does Man of La Mancha get redone, or
Smarty
is this only like
pants
a
over
high
there.
school kind of thing?
Man of La Mancha? No, I
you ever seen Man of La Mancha?
Actually, I don't think I have.
You have not seen Man of La Mancha?
I know the music,
Why
but
don't
I don't
you
think I've
tell us
actually
about
ever
it,
seen
Jim?
it staged.
I was a little boy.
Why don't you sing
My
a few
mother,
tunes?
I actually maybe would, but not right now. Maybe Callie will on Friday.
Okay.
One of the great stories. I mean, the story is just beautiful. Yeah. It's just a beautiful production, and the music is beautiful. And I saw it when I was like 6 years old with my mother.
Was that Robert Goulet?
No, it was Robert Kiley was his name, I think. Could you check that, Jamie, to make sure I'm not making a fool of myself, which I'm sure I am anyway, since no one's interested in this except me anyway. Man of La Mancha is fabulous. Did you ever see Man of La Mancha?
No, I did not.
Well, then let's move on, if that's the case, because absolutely nobody wants to talk about this.
Was that your first show? Is that what you're saying?
No, my first show. I'm so glad you asked this. When I was growing up in Philadelphia, do you know that was the city through which all Broadway shows came?
Well, and Boston.
Boston,
well, it was
too.
It was primarily
We did a lot of
Philadelphia.
tryouts right here in Boston.
Yeah.
So why don't you say...
Porgy and Bess.
Why don't
Porgy
you
and
ask, just
Bess.
like he did, what was the first show you ever saw, Jim?
What was the first show you ever saw, Jim?
There was a young woman who was performing for the first time. She was a fairly good singer. I think she's still around today. In something called Funny Girl.
Barbra Streisand.
And I was like 5 years old
my
or 6
goodness.
years old, and no one ever heard of her. And there was this kid, Barbra Streisand, in Funny Girl, and I saw that in Philadelphia.
That's amazing.
So my
thank
first
you.
show was The Sound of Music, and that, of
With
course,
whom?
had the Von Trapp children playing.
Was Robert Kiley. Thank you, Jim.
And so what did I do after I saw The Sound of Music? I packed my bags and I ran away to go to New York.
That's not true.
To become an actress.
How far from Fall River did you make
I
it?
got 2 blocks up the street with my little suitcase.
Did you
I
really?
was like
You're
5 years.
joking.
No, I'm serious. I wanted to become one of the Von Trapps.
Von Trapp.
I wanted to be like little Liesel. She was the oldest sister, but I could have been little Greta.
Did they have a local... Was there a Von Trapp local connection?
They,
What was it?
Adamsville, Rhode Island, too, and I think they were down there, too, weren't they, the Von Trapp? Didn't they have something to do with the, Adamsville, Rhode Island, and Westport Line? I think they did, too. Yeah, they had something going on down there.
And they still have a presence in Vermont. And I think the last time Sound of Music was here, I sat next to one of the Von Trapps. Just coincidentally, my seats were next to one of the Von Trapp people.
Wow.
Well, I think I've seen the Sound of Music movie with Julie Andrews about 9,000 times. I mean, every time it's on, you'd be cooking on a Saturday night, then you see, there's the Sound of Music, and you have to watch it. And how do we handle a problem like Maria? how do we catch her, whatever it is, and pin her down. I mean, it was a great movie.
I'll sing to Dream the Impossible Dream if you sing that.
I'm not singing that.
Okay, forget that.
Edelweiss, that's the only thing I can sing, but I'm not singing it now.
If you read Christopher Plummer's autobiography, he didn't love that experience.
Von Trapp.
Captain Von Trapp. He called it S&M. He did.
Wait a minute.
That's what he called it in the book.
Wait a minute. Why?
I don't know. I think it just wasn't his cup of tea to do something. And then when it blew up and became so famous, of course, I'm sure he enjoyed the recognition and fame for that, but I don't think it was just necessarily what he
it was a little
saw
saccharine.
himself
The
doing.
movie was a little bit saccharine.
Yeah, because he was a great Shakespearean actor, so this was quite different.
He and Julie Andrews making eyes at each other out in the backyard.
Wild Goose Dreams, before you go.
Yeah, this is a show at Speakeasy Stage Company. Actually, I realize we're all about romance today, but this is a very modern romance because this takes place in the whole world of the internet. And I was thinking, I have that song, Look at All the Lonely People, in my head. And so you have a woman who has defected from North Korea, who is living in South Korea away from her family and very distraught over leaving her family, in particular her father, behind. And so she is trying to meet someone online, and she meets this man who is what he describes himself as a goose father, somebody who's living in Korea but has sent his family, wife and children, away to an English-speaking country so that they can be educated. So they come together online, but online it's rendered by all of these different characters who are playing the chat that they have through the apps, and they're playing the emojis and all the little search bars, and all of that is just manifested on stage. But we see this relationship finally come to fruition, but all of the baggage that comes with that too. Her father is rendered in a penguin because he can't take flight, and she knows that she's left him behind. So it's a very highly visual show, but really it's one of the first I've seen that kind of encapsulate what it's like to be in this online dating world and to be so removed but come together in the cyberspace.
When's that there till?
That is on view until April 8th.
What's the TV deal?
This week we're speaking to Anne Bogart, legendary director who is doing Boston Lyric Opera's Blackbeard's Castle.
Oh, fun.
Along with Alma Mahler's 4 songs. It's being staged at the cruise ship terminal in South Boston.
Where?
At the cruise ship terminal. Black Falcon is what they called it at one point. And it's a very immersive psychological experience is how it's built.
Neat.
So she gives us a preview of that.
Okay, well, we're glad you're back.
Where was he?
They were on Pledge for a while.
Oh, the show. I thought you meant, okay.
Yeah, they were on Pledge for a while.
I was with you, Jim. I thought, where did I go?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we're glad you're back, too.
Jared Bowen, thank you very
nice
much.
to see you.
We've been speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He's host of Open Studio with Jared Bowen, which you can catch Friday nights right here on GBH2. Thank you very much, Jared. Okay, coming up, we're going to talk with CNN's John King. He's going to tell us if the imminent indictment of former President Trump does that mean today? Does it mean next week? Does it mean 2 months from now? What does imminent mean in relation to President Trump? And we're also going to talk to him about Joe Biden's decision to authorize drilling in Alaska and how that's going to play politically for the president. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News, live from the Boston Public Library.
GBH is excited to explore the world of Grimm's fairy tales. Join us online March 22nd at noon as we go beyond the page and onto the stage with masterful director Lear de Bessonnet as she honors Stephen Sondheim's legendary memory and his Broadway masterpiece Into the Woods. Coming to us from Boston's Emerson Colonial Theater, she'll walk us through her magical journey in creating the enchanting elements of a fairy tale world. For more information, head over to gbh.org/events.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Tools of the Mind, the research and play-based curriculum offers pre-K and K teachers tools designed to help ensure children develop cognitive, social, emotional, and self-regulation skills. toolsofthemind.org. And Neville Place Assisted Living in Cambridge, providing residents with wellness, care, and support services designed to help seniors stay sharp, social, and independent. More at nevilleplace.org/care.
Welcome Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Braude, live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. John is also the host of Inside Politics. You can catch that weekdays at noon. Hey there, John.
Really slow day in the news.
Yeah,
really
very slow
nice
day
to see you, John.
in the news. So, I was joking before about we've been hearing about this indictment of former President Trump involving the hush payments paid to Stormy Daniels for days. We've been calling it imminent. I saw on your show today that there's been a huge GOP backlash against the district attorney in Manhattan. Senator Rand Paul apparently said the DA in Manhattan should be put in jail for pursuing these charges. So give us the latest, John King.
Well, the three least spoken words in Washington, I don't know, or we don't know the timing here. Look, all indications are, and all our great law enforcement and justice reporters, have the understanding that the grand jury is at the finish line, and now the prosecutor would have to go in and say to the grand jurors, I would like you to return a bill of indictment against Donald Trump, and here are the charges I think you could do that on. That hasn't happened, at least that we know of. The grand jury does not meet today. It had its last witness yesterday. So it was Donald Trump, remember, who said over the weekend that he thought he would be indicted and arrested today. So in many ways, he has started the timing question of this. And he's done that for, cynical perhaps, but for political reasons, to gin up what you just said, to try to force other presidential candidates on the Republican side to side with Trump, to get the House Republicans and any Republican he can find to say this is a political persecution. And so it is fascinating, as someone who, before I came to Washington, used to cover courts and trials, I don't remember anything like this. Now, this would be a rendezvous with history. No sitting or former American president has ever been charged with a criminal offense. So it would be a rendezvous with history if the Manhattan DA goes forward. But there's a whole lot of speculation right now, and it's ginned up on purpose by Donald Trump to try to shape the court of public opinion, if you will, before he might end up in a court of law.
But, John, even though obviously everybody has to responsibly say no one knows except the DA and his people, the fact that security officials, from what we read and hear, whether it's Secret Service people or the New York City cops or whomever, are taking security precautions. I assume none of that would happen unless there was some sign off or at least some heads up from the district attorney's office that there is concern about safety, particularly after the president says protest, protest, protest. And we know what that meant on January 6th. So the likelihood is good that Bragg is allowing that to happen because something is going to happen, no?
I have not seen anybody who says that word comes directly from Bragg's office. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I don't see that in any of our CNN reporting, that Bragg has given them the wink nod, that he's definitely going to present charges. If you have this part of this is common sense. New York state law requires that if you're going to present charges against somebody to a grand jury, you have to give them a chance to come in. So we knew last week Donald Trump given a chance to come in. He said no. Then the Trump organization did send what we believe to be the final witness in yesterday, this attorney, Mr. Costello, who used to work with Michael Cohen, to go in and attack his credibility. And then Trump himself saying publicly, so you have what I would say are responsible conversations and coordination among, you mentioned, Secret Service, New York City Police, the Capitol Police here in Washington, D.C. have taken some steps around the Capitol, eerily, stirring memories of January 6th and all that. And to their credit, I'm going to say this in air quotes, I guess, the Republicans who have been criticizing the prosecutor have also been urging everybody, if you do come out and protest, and that's, of course, you're right, if something happens here, to please be peaceful. So I think we're in for 24 to 48 to maybe even longer than that, because another interesting thing, Jim and Marjorie, is that if Donald Trump were indicted by this grand jury on Wednesday or Thursday of this week, our reporting is that he most likely would not turn himself in for a first court appearance until sometime next week. So we have to go through several steps in this drama, assuming it plays out the way everything appears to be, but I just want to keep adding the words. We have no definitive information on the charges.
John, this may be one of those impossible questions, and maybe a naive question too. When the Republicans are falling over themselves to criticize the possible indictment, I assume primarily so they don't run afoul of Donald Trump, even if they're running against Donald Trump like DeSantis with this pitiful statement, if I can just read it. I don't know what goes into paying hush money to a porn star to secure silence over some time of alleged affair. I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is you have prosecutors ignoring crimes happening every single day in his jurisdiction. A lot of the Republicans saying it's a political act. Do any of them worry who say things like this about how this is just yet another step in the undermining of key institutions in this democracy? Trump undermined the media. He undermined democratic elections. Now they're participating with him in the undermining of trust in the judiciary. Do they worry about any of that, or is that just secondary, yesterday's news kind of thing?
There are a lot of other more sober Republicans, whether they're in elected office or whether they're strategists or people who have been in campaigns or been in government positions who are have a Republican pedigree, who would tell you they worry about this. The people who are doing it clearly don't, because they would stop. They would not allow themselves to get caught up in the politics of the moment. I don't think, Jim, we know in the short term this helps Trump with Republicans. If he gets indicted or even just talk again about payments to an adult film actress because of an alleged affair, Donald Trump lost the presidency in 2020 for a reason. A lot of Republicans in the suburbs, voters in the suburbs who are open to voting Republican, whether they're Republicans or independents or whatever, walked away from him. So I think recycling these character questions, and that's what DeSantis was doing there, trying to have it both ways.
Of course.
Stirring questions about Donald Trump's character while then criticizing the prosecutor. So he wanted both sides of the coin, if you will. It helps Trump in the short term because you just see it. Even Republicans who privately tell you we wish he would go the you-know-what away are saying, oh, this is a political witch hunt by the Manhattan DA. We don't know where this is going. It helps Trump in the short term air his grievances and rally his people. Who knows where it takes us if and when we get to the point where a former president of the United States is actually facing a criminal trial.
Well, it's very early and it's only one poll, but we spoke about the Quinnipiac, thank you. Quinnipiac poll the other day, which had Trump widening his lead over DeSantis. So I guess based on that, you would think that if that's indicative that this is not really hurting the president, as you say, among people that are inclined to like him.
We have a long way until people vote, but I do think that, look, right after the midterms when DeSantis won an overwhelming re-election, I would argue he ran against a very weak candidate, but still impressive. He won a huge, re-election victory. DeSantis was the flavor of the month. He shot way up to equal, in some polls even ahead of Donald Trump among Republicans. And then what happens? Trump declares his candidacy. Haley declares her candidacy. DeSantis has his book and starts moving around. And he's taking a lot of incoming from Republicans, from Democrats, everybody else. So he's come down some. I think that's sort of the natural law of gravity. You go from being sort of the untouchable to now you're actually in the fray and getting hit. There's a lot of time for, the question is, can DeSantis, you see it, right? You're suffering, you're bleeding some. A smart politician says, okay, what do we have to do to fix it? So I think that's the next challenge for DeSantis as we move from March into April and beyond. And he says he's going to wait till the Florida legislature finishes, so probably May before an announcement, May or June. Can you fix when you have a problem in politics? A good politician figures out how to fix it. So we'll watch DeSantis, see if he can figure that out.
One last question about a possible imminent Trump indictment. What kind of conversations are you having in the newsroom about how this is covered? I mean, we had Marty Barron here the other day, who obviously was the editor of the Globe and then the Washington Post, and we talked a lot about what his was she the ombudsperson, the media critic Margaret Sullivan, in her final column wrote about how the press blew it the first time around, don't blow it the second time around with Donald Trump. It seems to me if a guy is running for president and he is the first president in American history, former president, to be indicted for a crime, the strict guidelines that responsible press people are applying to coverage of Trump is very hard to stick by. I mean, it seems to me that pronouncements by that defendant, once this happens, almost on their face become news that almost always need to be covered. Have you and your colleagues talked about what happens should there be an indictment in terms of Trump coverage?
We're talking about it if they're in that in that conditional, if there is a Trump indictment. But Jim, we're also talking about, I was talking about it this morning, and that how do we cover it in the meantime? Because he's the one who put out there that he would be arrested today. And so he said that. He's a declared candidate for president. He's a former president of the United States. He is under investigation by this grand jury. So you have to cover what he says. At the same time, are you playing into his hand by helping him stoke his grievances and doing all these things? And look, I'm a dinosaur. You know, I'm an old AP Wire guy before I switched to television. I can't, talking about a prospective indictment is something we didn't, you know, it's unimaginable 20 or 30 years ago in the business. But again, we're having a conversation on public radio with a guy who works for CNN, who's training as a wire guy. Think of all the other different media silos out there as well. So the genie's out of the bottle here. And I think in a conversation with an esteemed editor like Marty Barron, or if someone with my experiences, we can only do what is our brand? What is your organization's brand? And how do you cover this as responsibly as possible? It's unprecedented. Everything about it, the legal part of it, in the middle of a campaign, watching the other candidates play out. I've said this to you guys before. You know, I like to say, well, this is my 10th presidential election. I have all of this experience. Sometimes that experience is really helpful. Sometimes it's useless because we're just, whether it's the technology side of our business or the polarized politics of the moment, a lot of these days are brand new for all of us. And you just got to take it slow, take it cautious, try to be fair to all sides involved. And here we go. But it's dizzying to a degree because we've never been here before.
Talking to John King from CNN.
You know, John King, earlier in the show, we were talking about the UN report, which basically said we're polluting ourselves into an extinction. We have 10 years to get our act together, or we're looking at catastrophe. Bill McKibben sponsoring with his third act this protest today. We have one here in Boston where people are cutting up their credit cards from the big banks like Bank of America, Citibank, Wells Fargo that fund a lot of these big oil pipe expansions. And we had a story in the Globe today about all the terrible things around here with ski resorts not being able to open this year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So with that as a backdrop, you know, I'm just wondering the politics behind Joe Biden's decision to okay this big oil, ConocoPhillips drilling in Alaska. When he ran as a climate change guy, I mean, people have speculated it was about his trying to get moderates and independents for the 2024 race. But I think it's so disheartening so many people, based on the text messages we get here and the phone calls we've gotten about this. I just don't get why he did this.
His argument is with Putin's war in Ukraine, Putin signing these agreements with President Xi Jinping today, that in the short term, the United States and Western allies need energy, and in the short term, that's going to come from fossil fuels, even as you try to accelerate, the switching to a clean energy environment. That would be the White House argument. I know that is not acceptable, not satisfying to many of the activists out there in the climate community. The president would also say, like today, he's designating these two giant monuments and conservation spaces, if you will, some of that for historical purposes, some of that for land conservation, some of it for sort of a combination of the sum. So the White House would say, look at the entire record. Yes, you're mad about a couple of things, but on the whole, we're making progress. But when you get to that UN report, again, there are people who will take issue with some of the language or some of the specifics. But when you read it, it sure sounds like we are teetering on the cliff.
Right.
Whether it's individuals, whether it's government, whether it's businesses, it's an all of the above, right? But the government does have the authority. And I do think that report will only add to the energy and the anxiety to a degree about some of the president's decisions. Again, the White House would push back saying that they have done more than any other president to advance the climate agenda. And they have legislative achievements that they can point to in that. But the big decision recently in Alaska certainly has a lot of people distrustful and anxious.
Speaking of Xi and Putin meeting, which you mentioned yesterday and today, I know we don't know all the details. The fact of their meeting alone is a pretty important detail. How bad is the news for Ukraine out of this face-to-face meeting?
Well, from a quote-unquote positive perspective, from Ukraine's perspective, we know U.S. intelligence officials say that Putin wants lethal aid, wants China to commit to pretty aggressive lethal aid in Ukraine, help, weapons, bullets, ammunition, and the like. And the Chinese have said that's not what this is about. Now, the Chinese have a peace plan, which is just not workable. It would let Putin essentially keep stolen property, stolen land in Ukraine. It would ask the United States and NATO to back off and get out of the way. The Chinese quote-unquote peace plan is not a reasonable proposal. What most people view it as is Xi's way of saying, gee, I'm trying to be a nice guy, and then giving Putin more time, right? And Putin benefits from time. But we have not seen any Chinese commitment to the lethal weapon. So Putin might get something out of this. Just the pictures, to your point, Jim, just the pictures or a defiant message to the United States, to NATO, to the West. The Japanese prime minister is in Kyiv today, while the Chinese president is in Moscow. So you do have this pick your side. This is a pick your side moment in the globe, whether it comes to Ukraine. Marjorie just mentioned the climate fight. I think we're going to see a lot of this going forward. So it is a look. The Russian economy is not what it used to be. Xi is the tail wagging the dog here, and he believes he's getting some energy deals out of Putin at a discount, if you will, because Putin needs him right now. Where does it get us vis-a-vis Ukraine? You are seeing, as I said, the Japanese prime minister is there, the Europeans rushing to give more ammunition. Yeah. The Biden administration today saying it's going to get the tanks and the Patriot missile batteries to Ukraine more quickly than it had anticipated. So sometimes it's the old push and pull. Xi is helping Putin without a doubt. Does he help him on the ground? We don't know, but he certainly helps him keep the Russian economy going by buying all that energy. But the reaction of the United States and the West is to help Ukraine. So again, you see this tug-of-war moment on the global stage.
John King, would you have any Red Sox questions before we leave? Jim always tries to end with a Red Sox question.
I'm still thinking about that imminent indictment. I can't focus on anything else at the moment.
Okay. Well, we hope imminent doesn't mean June. That's what I'm concerned about. Imminent to me, like I said a million times, means like in the next hour, but it doesn't seem to be, imminent does not seem to mean that in political parlance coming out of D.C., John, I guess, right?
Right, that's what it means to old wire guy, John King. Imminent means like now.
Yeah, exactly.
But since Marjorie, do you ever go to spring training? I don't know if I've ever asked you. Are you a spring training guy or you're not?
I'm actually supposed to be in Arizona next week for my son's spring break, and we're going to do some spring training there. I've never been to the Red Sox spring training, which I need to do. It's a giant unchecked box on my bucket.
Yeah.
We should take the show some Tuesday, the three of us.
Hey,
that's
next year, go to JetBlue Park.
That's
I'd
right.
love it.
Hey, John King, thank you
we'll
very
try
much,
that,
as
John,
always.
actually. Good to talk to you, John. Be well.
Speaking with CNN's John King, Chief National Correspondent, host of Inside Politics for CNN. You can see Inside Politics every weekday at noon. We watch it every single day. Coming up.
We do watch it, by the way, even though we're on the air.
Well, because that's what I learned about Rand Paul, saying that
too.
the DA in Manhattan should go to jail, which seemed a little over the top. I don't think the DA had broken any laws as far as we know. Anyway, we're going to talk about a contretemps or controversy about the banning of those nibs, those little small bottles of alcohol that have a tendency to miss the trash bin and end up in the gutter, littering all over town. And I'm always kind of curious why you're just getting a little nip. You know what I mean? Seems a little weird.
It's what you can afford, Marjorie.
Or because you're drinking in your car and you want something really quick and really fast. So anyway, we're going to talk about that coming up next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at facebook.gbh/news.
The city of York, Pennsylvania is steeped in American history and awash in contemporary American problems like poverty and violent crime.
York is a place of second chances.
We're continuing our series, 23 Mayors in 2023, with Mayor Michael Helfrich of York, PA. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. You can hear the DSO led by music director Fabio Luisi as they make their Boston debut live at Symphony Hall on Friday, March 24th. Tickets available at bso.org. And South County, Rhode Island, featuring 100 miles of coastline and 20 public beaches. South County visitors can find many ways to enjoy the water in the Ocean State. Learn more at southcountyri.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH. Jamie, did you say, where's Jamie? Did we hear earlier that the Attorney General is with us here on Friday? Does anybody know if that's true? Can you let us know if that's true? I think I saw that note and I ignored it. In the interim, one Boston City Councilor, Ricardo Arroyo, is looking to follow in Chelsea's footsteps and is proposing the city ban nips. Those little bottles of alcohol that have a tendency to miss the trash bin and end up in the gutter. Chelsea says the move has cut down dramatically on littering, which matters, but I would argue what matters maybe even more is public drunkenness and even drunk driving. But liquor store owners say they felt a squeeze in Chelsea. Around 10% of their profits, they say, comes from nips alone, according to an article in Commonwealth Magazine, which, by the way, was written by Sarah Betancourt, who now works with GBH. So what do you think? Are you pro-nip or pro-ban on little bottles, which also apparently aren't recyclable? Nips and you are our topic for the remainder of today's show. Were you on the nip issue?
Well, the nips just on the fact you can't recycle them when they're small, and they were apparently all over the streets in Chelsea, and they're not all over the streets in Chelsea anymore. I'm fine with getting rid of them. I mean, I feel bad for the liquor stores, but I think they will sell bigger quantities of liquor. And again, you said it's what you can afford before, but
you're probably right. It's more concealment.
That's what I think. Right. I think it's kids, or I think it's people that are going to get in their cars and they're going to down a couple of these nips and then throw them out the car. So if they get pulled over by the cops, they won't have any liquor in the car with them. That's what I suspect it is. Because why would you buy them otherwise? Wouldn't you just buy a half pint?
Just a little shot. You ever go in for a shot? I'm serious. You ever go in for just a little hit?
No, I've never gone in for a little hit.
You've
Jim.
never gone to a bar and have a shot?
I have a drink sitting at the bar, but that's different than going into a liquor store and buying a little thing of straight scotch or straight bourbon and just downing it in the parking lot, which I think is what
So you haven't done that in years?
I have not done that in years. I don't think I even did it when I was young and irresponsible. So I've got no problem with this.
Do you know they were unrecyclable? Is that a word? Unrecyclable until today? I didn't know that.
Which makes it even worse because you do see them all over the place, don't you? You do. And they're, people that have drinking problems that don't have any money, that's probably one of the reasons they buy it, because they can get it cheap and they can just kind of stay in a little bit of a buzz on all day long. But I don't think that's a good enough reason. When you listen to these statistics on Chelsea, in the years since the city banned the sale of the tiny 50 milliliter bottles and their hard liquor, as the story points out, public drunkenness has diminished, alcohol-related ambulance responses are way down, reduction of the number of people taken into protective custody for alcohol intoxication, and a 2-mile walk, this is by Sarah Betancourt, through downtown Chelsea in a recent weekday uncovered no nip bottles and no larger empty alcohol containers on the ground. So
by the way, it's not just a modest reduction, it's huge. It's like almost 1,000 or something, down to 100 or something in terms of ambulances taking people to the hospital with serious intoxication issues. So we want to know where you are on the nip issue. The Boston City Council may hold a hearing on this thing. It's not just Chelsea. I can't remember what I read. Is it Newton? There are a couple of other communities that apparently are...
Newton, Chelsea, and Wareham, Mashpee, Nantucket, and Falmouth.
Hey, Jamie, is the Attorney General here on Friday? Listen, she's here. I am right. When we're back at the library on Friday, the Attorney General joins us from 11 to 12. But now we are talking. I'm interested to hear what she thinks about this, too. What are you laughing about?
Well, we get some good texts here. Paul knows a lot about this. Paul from Worcester. He says a nip is the only bottle size of alcohol you can carry through the screening at the airport. So I hadn't thought of that angle. If you go on a flight, you can shove some of those bottles in there. But
isn't that what they give you on a flight? Not wine, but if you get the liquor drink, isn't that the size? I think it is. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Another texter has an idea. Just put a $1 deposit on them. This will both reduce consumption and litter, but they're not recyclable.
Did I read in that Betancourt article too? I'm so glad you mentioned her and this deposit thing. Didn't I read, unless I got it dead wrong, that talk about an unusual circumstance, that the liquor dealers themselves are lobbying that there be a deposit? They're in favor of the deposit. Usually the liquor people and the soda people are against deposits. Am I right about that or no?
I think so, Jim, but I'm not 100%. I'll have to go look through the story again.
Let's take some calls. And by the way, if you're pro-nip, we want to know what are the circumstances in which you find them to be most desirable.
Here's somebody who says, I know someone who would bring them on the T with them for the long ride back to Worcester from South Station. And Ron from Westport says, as a person in recovery for alcoholism, I can say from my own experience that purchasing nips was often a sign of trying unsuccessfully to control drinking, or a lack of funds due to drinking or drinking in the car, and I support the proposed ban. I mean, I think that is what we're getting at here. Probably people that are trying to, they're trying to get sober and they're having a tough time. Barry in the car, thank you for calling.
Hey, Barry.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to point just a different point of view to this.
Please.
We have a lot of nips in our house.
Sure.
Because my wife is a great cook. And a lot of recipes will call for 1 or 2 teaspoons of a particular liqueur. So instead of having to buy an entire bottle of whatever the liqueur is, she'll buy a nip, use 1 or 2 teaspoons, and we have the nips.
So essentially what you're saying, Barry, is your wife has convinced you that that's why she has a lot of nips in the house. Is that correct?
Yeah, Barry, booze lasts.
That's her story.
That's
right. That's her story.
Thank
Booze
you, Barry.
lasts
That was
almost
great.
forever. You know, I've had the same booze in my
That's
cabinets
another
for,
very good
for a
point.
very, very long time. Even things like Bailey's Irish Cream, which you wouldn't think would last.
Yeah.
With all that cream in it, but
Yeah.
it does. It's
Well,
really,
apparently it doesn't last in Barry's
doesn't
wife's
last in
kitchen.
Barry's house. Yeah, that's right. That's her story, and she's sticking to it.
877-301-8970. So that's one pro-nip argument so far today.
Then Linda from Dover says she knows lots of young people sneak nips into bars and clubs because it is cheaper. So I guess they go into the ladies' room and guzzle one down and come
You mean
back
like
out.
illegal? You mean like underage people?
Or they just do it because they don't want to pay that much for the drink, so they
Oh, I
excuse
see, I see.
themselves or go onto the table. I don't know what they do. I guess they go to the bathroom and just like the kids do.
Nothing
in
like
college.
having a drink in the bathroom. I've always found that
Well,
to be really
they're so
appealing.
small, you can get it down
I
like in one
understand.
shot. It's like the Jell-O shots all these kids have in the closet before they go out in the college.
You know a lot about this for somebody who doesn't do it.
I
don't
do.
you think?
Well, I've researched it extensively.
I'm sure you
That is
have.
my story, Jim.
And she's
I'm
sticking to it, yeah.
And in Cranston?
I think. Hi, Ann.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure, thank you.
I'm for banning nips. Rhode Island has looked at it. I don't think it passed this last legislative session, but I'm hoping it does if it didn't. I got hit by a drunk driver who had nips rolling around in her car. So I agree with Marjorie on the concealment, easier to get in and out. You can get it in and out of a school dance. And it's, there's litter everywhere with them. The other thing is that you can also sneak them into a school locker room and drink after you win a hockey game, because it happened in Rhode Island about 2 weeks ago.
Hey, Ann, how are you doing after being hit by a drunk driver?
I'm okay. It was a while ago. I was very fortunate. Someone behind her noticed her erratically driving, and they called it in. So, I feel very bad for her. I think she had some issues.
Uh-huh.
But fortunately, it was a low-speed crash, on a side road. But yeah, that's what was found in her car, were nips of Fireball.
We're glad you're well. Ann, thanks for your call. We appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much.
Someone texts and says their dog picks up empty nips while walking, and they're concerned that something could happen to the dog. And somebody else says nips on sale are cheaper than buying a fifth, but boy, that makes up a lot of nips.
No,
I think.
it can't
You'd have to
be.
have a lot of nips to carry home. Bob from Plymouth, what do you think?
Hey, Bob.
The legendary Jim Browdy,
Oh.
and always wonderful Marjorie.
That would be Bob from Plymouth. Let me guess. I would bet you are pro-nip.
I am pro-nip. They're the perfect size. You got like a Dunkin' coffee. You can pour a Bailey's nip in it, maybe a Kahlua too. Who doesn't like a couple of nice nips?
By the way, he has laughter in his voice. I bet you that is part of the reason that some people do buy him. Dad, the coffee. I'm not defending or nor criticizing. Don't you think there's some legitimacy to that? People do that. Add little Baileys to your Dunkin'.
Well, I guess, but I guess, you mean in their car you're talking about,
Let's hope
right,
not in the
Bob?
car. Not in the car.
Because otherwise, why wouldn't you just buy a pint or a fifth and have it at your house, right?
Sitting on a bench. I don't know. What about it, Bob?
Whatever you want. You want to have Bailey's? You want to have Kahlua? You can have whatever you want. You can have a variety.
I think we got the message, Bob. Thank you, as always, for your call. We appreciate it.
This is Carol from Lincoln, Rhode Island. She says, I love the nips. I only have a drink at holiday time. My host or hostess do not necessarily have what I like. And oops, my thing is moving around the screen here, so I can't read the rest of it.
I'm pro the ban, and I know you're not surprised because I'm pro almost every ban.
Yeah.
But, as someone, I'm not talking about people who have a real problem with alcoholism. My experience with food, with which I've had a problem often on my whole life, is everything is portion size. If I get a small amount of something not very healthy to eat, I'll eat that and that'll be plenty. If I get a huge portion, I'll eat the whole portion. isn't there some argument to be made if you want to limit your alcohol intake that maybe having a nip is a better, again, not for alcoholics, I'm talking about for normal drinkers, a better way to control it?
The previous texter who said he was in recovery, was a former alcoholic, or alcoholic in recovery, I guess I should say, said that. That was how some people who are trying to control their drinking control it by buying only a small amount. A lot of people are doing the litter thing.
This next guy, let's get the caller, because he's making the point. David in Rhode Island, hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Excellent.
Listen, I'm part of a group here in South Kingstown that is been collecting nips to illustrate the degree of the problem.
Wow.
And last year, over a 3-month period, we collected over 20,000 nips. This year, in a period that's ending next week, we have collected 70,500 nips.
God.
Wow.
Wait, over what? I missed over what period of time?
A 3-month period, December 27th to March 27th.
So what's the result of your terrific work, do you think?
Well, so far it's just gotten a lot of publicity. The guy who's the president of our group, Friends of the Saugatucket, he's been on TV, on the news, and it's gotten a lot of great coverage because the photographs, he's filled up two rowboats full of these things, and it makes a great photo op.
Hey, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the second thing is that there is a bottle bill that's coming up. It's out of committee. It's coming up for hearings as early as next week. So we'll see where that goes. But the other thing is that what I've been pointing out is that in 1989, the Rhode Island legislature passed a law. It's saying if a beverage container cannot be recycled, it is prohibited to be sold. And it has never been enforced in 34 years.
Hey, David, we really appreciate the call. Could you send us a photograph to bprwgbh.org of the two rowboats full of the nips?
Definitely happy
Do that.
to, yeah.
bprwgbh.org. And send us your contact info, too. David, thanks.
We've had several texts from people who say they're in alcohol recovery. Stuart and Millis is just another one. And he says people buy nips to control their drinking. You chug them and toss them with no evidence. And people are also texting and saying that we need an anti-nip ordinance. One of them is from Cambridge, Jim, says they are ubiquitous in East Cambridge. And somebody else, I can't find the text now, but they said that they were walking through the street in Everett, and they just were all over the place. They were all over the place in some exit ramp somewhere. So I guess they're really bad about, very close to a ramp to 93. Scary, the number of nip bottles that are there.
So you claim you don't know anything about nips. Zoe, our colleague, claims she knows everything about nips.
Oh, okay.
Here's her message. Dunkin' Donuts should just do what Taco Bell does. Open a cantina where you can order a Baja Blast with 2 shots of vodka in it, no nips needed. Boy, she does know. She really knows her stuff.
Somebody
else
just
research.
texted that they were in a liquor store and they saw that someone buying 3 nips and a big bottle of Coke. And the person says, "Oh no, they weren't drinking and driving. No, absolutely not." So,
by the way, of all the issues, I care a lot about the litter thing that this guy from Rhode Island was just talking about, obviously, and others people talk. The ability to really conceal, is a serious problem.
Yeah.
No, and drinking and driving.
John from Beverly was saying that he was buying his $5 scratch ticket, and the guy in front of me was the 3 nips of Bacardi and a 16-ounce Coke.
So we may hear another side. Dan from Boston is in the liquor business. Dan, what's your perspective? Thanks for joining us.
So I work for a small local distillery in Boston.
Yeah.
Part of the reason for nips that are good is because some of the nips, especially for brands like mine, will make it so people will buy one and try it and be able to bring it home. The other good thing about nips, too, is for the stores, they are making the highest profit off of them. Whether, it's kind of a slow dime, fast, dime, slow penny situation. So they're definitely making a little bit more money and being able to pay their rent and their employees.
Well, I have to say, the first thing you mentioned, I'm embarrassed to say I never thought of this the whole time. I've done what Dan just mentioned. When someone says try a different liquor or liqueur that I've never done before, and I don't want to spend $20 or $30 or $40,
well,
I can buy a nip.
But you're not going to spend $20 or $30 for most half pints unless you're buying some really high-end liquor.
Yeah.
That's the thing, Dan. You can get a half pint, right?
How about that, Dan?
And one nip is only one drink.
You can get a half pint, but I mean, it would be better for the people who couldn't hide the alcohol, sure. But it just does bring up the cost again to try something new.
Got it.
Someone's going to try something for 99 cents, but not for $10.
Hey, Dan, thank you for your call. We appreciate your
Lots of
perspective.
people are saying they have used NIPS to smuggle liquor into sporting events. Have you priced out drinks at the Boston Garden lately, says Mitch in New Bedford. And listen to this one. In Connecticut, the highest density of NIPS are on the street outside daycare centers, parents getting prepped to pick up the kids. You should not be doing that.
Well, that's a good reason not to ban
Well,
them,
if you're
right?
pushing the carriage, I suppose you can do what you're going to do. But if you're driving the kid home, maybe you didn't. You shouldn't be doing those kind of things.
By the way, this is the point in the show where I tell you the show's over.
Oh, the show's over.
Show's over.
That's too bad.
Oh, that's really too bad. We're sorry to all these others.
Boy, people are very passionate about NIPS.
They apparently are.
Absolutely, Jim. I've gotten tons of text messages. Have not been able to read even a quarter of them. But thank you very much.
We should say why
for
we're
texting.
talking about this is because the Boston City Council under Councilor Arroyo is contemplating having hearings on a ban. So if you're interested, contact his office.
Dan from Cambridge says sometimes I just want to slip a few nips in my coffee when I'm watching Jim and Marjorie at the library.
Well, that's actually a
there you go.
pro-nip position that I can agree with.
Just don't tell anybody, Dan. If you're doing that, we'll have to haul you out of here in cuffs. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thank you to the people that came down to the Boston Public Library.
We appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much for coming here. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Tomorrow we're going to be joined by NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, national security expert Juliet Kayyem from Harvard Law School, Roger Berkowitz of Legal
I can't wait. He has a
Seafoods
new
fame
business
on his latest venture. We can't wait to hear about that.
He's
Maybe
bringing food, by the way.
Bringing food. Can't beat food from Roger Berkowitz of Legal Seafoods. Okay.
He's not of Legal Seafoods.
Well, he's not of Legal Seafoods anymore, but he was of Legal Seafoods for years.
Rogers Fish Company, I think.
Fame.
Fame,
Let's put it
that's
that way.
correct.
And as well as the Boston Globe's Shirley Young and our food policy analyst, Corby Kummer. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John the Claude Parker, our executive producer, Jerry Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL team, Evelyn Brito, Steve Baracci, Angelica Marrero. And thank you, Jim, for coming in today.
Thank me?
You did a very nice job.
Oh, thank you. How was Springsteen, Jim? He was fabulous. He was fabulous.
That's right.
And he's old, which is really encouraging.
That's right. As we know, Jim and his Tesla La 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 were at the Springsteen concert.
My kid
La La
drove
La
me a Jeep.
last night. That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
I am sticking to it.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in
Thank
today. Hope
you.
you can tune in tomorrow. Meanwhile, have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.